All right, everybody, we're live. Hey, welcome to Millstone Self-Reliance Group, Millstone-SRG. I'm one of your hosts over here, Mark. Blake is still just wrapping up his family, annual family hunting trip. We've got two guests for you tonight, one of whom is in the middle of a major storm and just lost power as I was talking to him in the pregame, and that's Clint. Hopefully, we'll be able to get him on. And then we've got Patrick coming on, who should be joining us in a couple minutes here. I just got off the phone with him for a second ago. Hey, I hope whoever you are, wherever you are, you're watching this, you're kind of strapped in, have an adult beverage. We're not. I've got some bubbly water here for tonight, but we're going to kind of wrap up most of the first 72 hours. There's two sections that we might not get to, but just to let you know how we're organizing this. And even if we don't get to those last two sections, we'll bring them up next Sunday. So a week from now. Because a week from now, we will definitely be finishing it up completely. And I got P. Rick here. I'll bring him on. Hey, Patrick, I know you can hear me. You good? I'm just going to bring you on and continue with my little ramble. You good? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah, thumbs up. All right, let's add Patrick to the stage. But then, so Patrick and I were talking about this. So when we conclude this class, maybe this wasn't the right way to do it. I mean, hindsight's 2020. This first 72 hours has been what, like, we're on episode 4 now, and we're going to have a fifth one. And maybe we'll just have to do this and just do these differently going forward in the future. But next week, Patrick was talking about, and I totally agree with what we'll do is we'll come into the bat and we're going to bring some information and some documentation. We'll have some links. We'll show you some things that just open source information that you can download, you can have access to. And then, and again, I'm trying to still find that military manual. And I got a buddy who's sent me a couple things already, but it's the military's changed it. So it's not how it was when I was in, and I don't like the new format. And if nothing else, I'll just throw it on a whiteboard and I'll show you the concept. So next week, we're going to wrap this up. And if again, leave comments, not here in the live stream, but down below, and tell us what scenarios that you would like to see us talk about. Because that's what we'll do. We'll take 3 scenarios next week, and then we'll kind of plug them all the way back into where we started with this. And we'll just kind of run down the whole list, because I was even thinking about this today. And as we get into tonight's episode, shoot, move, communicate, and medicate, if you think from a self-reliance perspective that a potential nuclear war is what you need to be best prepared for, well, just even on the medicate, again, if you get into those levels of destruction, well, some medical tasks will still be important, but you might have to open up a whole nother level of medical tasks, or maybe you're going to spend your time and your energies learning more about decontamination, how to make yourself, secure in your shelter from chemical or biological or radiological type of agents or fallout and X, Y, and Z. So everything changes just a little bit. Hey, so before I kind of just say hi to everybody and read some of the comments and bring Patrick on, like I said, Clint just lost his power just as we were getting ready to go live. He might be able to come back on and join us. We'll see what happens. Clint, if you don't remember, or if you've forgotten, he was with us on the first episode. He's a former 18 series, and that's the military MOS for Special Forces. So he has just a depth of knowledge and background from that whole experience in his life. And then he's also the creator of Nemesis Camouflage. That over on my other side, Centerline Systems, we do business with him, and we're going to be introducing his camo going forward. Patrick, if you give me one more second, I'm just going to kind of introduce everybody into one little concept here for tonight as we move forward. I had a really great conversation with Clint yesterday in the morning. And I don't know about you boys and girls, but, I'm constantly looking at this. Even though I'm not in the agency anymore, I'm still constantly reading, multiple news sources from all over the world, because there's a lot of information that can be gleaned just from open source information, what you see the media publish. And if you're paying attention, as most of you well know, like here in the States anyway, our, legacy media used to have, its place, and its place was to keep the government in check. It was to expose the graft and the corruption and evil deeds or look, if you just go back to Iran, Contra, or Watergate, so that's where it used to be. If you think that's where it is now, I got a bridge to nowhere I'm willing to sell you, right? So if you just look at the I don't know if you want to call them the events or the obstacles that you are now faced with, and maybe obstacle is not even a good word. Maybe the word is threat or enemy. I'm not 100% sure. I got to sit and think about that a little bit more. Or maybe an opponent maybe is another way of saying it. But there's no doubt about it that the mainstream media or the legacy media, and I think that also applies over here to social media, is not your friend. If you speak out against certain narratives, if you try to run a certain type of business, and everybody knows what I'm talking about, it's all out there. Just go back into, the last 4 years, look at, 2019, 2020, 20 and 2021, yeah, actually into 22 as well. And just look at how everybody was attacked if you didn't go along with the narrative of Corona. And I'm not sitting here saying Corona wasn't real and that Corona didn't kill people. That's not the point at all. But if you look at how anybody who was actually trying to do, again, we're supposed to follow the science. If you spoke out against that, and look, and I knew it was a farce before it was even became really a big thing here in America, because the moment we knew the size of that particulate, if you actually believed in science, you knew that a normal mask and even an N95 wasn't going to do anything, because N95 filters out 95% of particulates that are 0.003 microns and larger. And don't quote me on this, I don't remember it exactly, but that particulate is 0.0001 microns. Well, that's like trying to use a tennis net to stop a BB. That doesn't work that way, and that's not how viruses and everything spread. Yet here we are today, and this is where my ramble kind of wraps up. But that was forced down everyone's throat. And if you went out and you were paddleboarding in the ocean, cops were waiting for you to arrest you. If you look at other events that have taken place, and I'm just going to pull just quote unquote recent events out of my fourth point of contact. I don't think I need to explain what that is. I'm sitting on it. But if you just take everything from Bin Laden, the Vegas shooter, January 6th, quote unquote insurrection, Jeffrey Epstein. Hey, Ghislaine Maxwell's in jail right now for human trafficking, but we don't have any notification of who the humans who were trafficked and to whom they were trafficked. So, just again, bad examples. Where's the January 6th bomber? Where's the cocaine in the White House? Where's the PP dossier? Michael Steele, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you combine modern social media and modern legacy media. And, no one's even talking about the fact that somebody just tried to kill Trump barely a little over a month ago. And then that the FBI just released the body for cremation in an ongoing investigation. I mean, again, and that goes into Scalia and other things. So you put your own tinfoil hat on and do your own research. I'm just throwing it out there because, in my opinion, humble opinion for what it's worth, and as we get into talking about tonight's subjects and then using that to reflect back upon the last 3 episodes, whatever it is that you are being self-reliant, whatever it is that's compelling you to become more self-reliant or more prepared, however you want to look at that, I hate to say it. And then I know some people watch this who are overseas. Look at the EU, look at the UK. What now? Misogyny is going to be treated just like it's terrorism. People are going to jail for mean tweets, et cetera, et cetera. I really do think, as we kind of take a step back and look at who we've become as people, I don't know if it's a cabal. I don't know if it's like the deep state. I don't know if it's a group of people, if it's one thing, whether you want to call it Satan or evil. But clearly there are people who do not have your interests at heart. And if you think that's a political thing, dude, I'll throw Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and, the fucking eye patch dude in there as well. They're just as guilty and evil as, the Chuck Schumers and the Nancy Pelosi's. And by the way, and just on that note, if you think that your government's okay, explain to me in constitutional terms how it is that Joe Biden just got, who was not going to leave the fight, decided to leave the fight, and Kamala Harris, who didn't get a single delegate. And I know the DNC is coming up, but I mean, I'll bet anyone $1 if you don't think Kamala Harris is going to be the DNC, their representative here once it's all done. All right, that was my little ramble, kind of also just because I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think that's very important. And the more I kind of look at it, the more I realize that I think the thing that's within that knife fighting range, that thing that's right in front of me, not, you know, a couple hundred yards away or over the horizon away, but that thing that's right in front of me that could do the damage to me right now is unfortunately a lot of the mechanisms, you know, that are quote unquote that are part of my government, that are part of the institutions that are part of my society. Patrick, I'm going to bring you on in a second, but let me just give me a second. I'll just give everybody a quick shout out. And, you know, we normally don't do that over here, but I'm going to do it because, again, I'm trying to, you know, give Clint a little bit of time to come on. We got Gene saying can't wait. Thanks, Gene. And again, chime in with your thoughts and comments about what's going on in your country. Well, actually, maybe you shouldn't do that because I can throw you in jail just for having an opinion. Learn me something. Enjoyed the last one. Looking forward to see what's in store for tonight. Yeah, hey, strap in, pour yourself an adult beverage. Snowshoe, checking in, ready to go. Gene, join every show. Thanks. Hey, well, thanks for watching, Gene. Snowshoe, any information we get is better than what we have now. Well, you know, that's a sad thing to say, but yes. We got Paul. Notifications for this stream were early and often, unlike the last Centerline stream. Apparently, ScrewTube doesn't approve of people helping people. Paul, thanks for joining the live, and that's exactly the case. So that just goes into what I just said. If you think like ScrewTube, Instagram, Google, you know, like, I mean, really, I hate to say it, but you really almost, and that's something that might come up tonight, both for Centerline and for what we're doing here. You know, you still want to be on the ScrewTube platform because that's where a lot of people are. But it begs the question, why? Why are people over here? Why are you over on a platform that actually wants to suppress your free speech? Because once your free speech goes away, well, where do you think, and this is already happening, so what do you think happens next? So, you know, Rumble, Twitter, I think I'm going to end up having to do the blue check marks over on Twitter and really focus a lot of energies over there, because that's at least a free speech platform. And we know it isn't over here on ScrewTube, and it definitely isn't on Instagram. Convid. I actually like it. Convict 19. How about Convict 19, Gene? Snowshoe. Now, and there it is. And now they're going to come at us with some other little bullshit. And, you know, and the sad thing is, what if it's actually true? And this one is real. And this one really is as dangerous. Well, you've just destroyed everyone's faith in the institutions, which if I was really evil, that would be part of my plan. I would want you to lose faith in the institutions, because then I can create a scenario in which you're going to have to rely on the institutions to really, you know, help you out. Almost done here, Patrick, and then we'll bring you on. Gene reminds me of the film They Live. There's actually some good memes going on with that, Gene, where Roddy Piper is just looking over his glasses. You know, he's got glasses in his hand, and here's a thing about it, Kamala, and like, you know, it's just like, you know, Kamala 20, you know, 24, you know, then he puts the glasses on and it's all communism and it's all the reality behind it. So I might have to watch that movie tonight. That's a damn good movie. And I always forget, you know, the other guy, because he's got two first names, like Tom Frank or whatever. He's a great actor too. He does a lot of the voiceover for the president in Rick and Morty, by the way. And then learn me something. Government officials feign compassion for their fellow man, but merely use people as pawns to amass power and wealth. Amen, brother. That's it. All right, Patrick. I don't think we need to do the intro, and I've already eaten up 13 minutes trying to kill some time to give Clint a chance to see if his power comes back on. But I think we roll into it, and I don't have a text from him. And I don't think we need to really explain who you are. We've done this a bunch of times. So unless you want to just remind everybody of who you are and say hi.
I'll just say hi. I think anybody who's watching or listening in probably has heard me on numerous occasions. So I think we just kick it off.
Okay, well then let me add the, so we're going to do this just a little bit differently here tonight, people. So here's what we're going to cover tonight. The 4 food groups. This is a stupid name I came up with somewhere way back in the day because I thought it was funny, you know. It's like the 4 food groups, you know, but these are the real food groups: shoot, move, communicate, medicate. So this is what we're going to kind of go over tonight. But I'm just going to run you through the slide deck just real quickly to see where we're going to go with the first category, which is going to be the shoot part. And by the way, I think some of you might be surprised in what we're going to say here tonight. And if we get Clint on, you're going to be really surprised. I don't think any one of us are the, you know, hey, you got to be a cool guy and out there and have all the, you know, plate carriers and be doing CQB. These are all tools. These are tools in your toolbox. And what I really have always respected about Patrick, you know, and I've known Patrick for a long time, you know, not always like hanging out in the same state or, you know, elbow to elbow, but Patrick's been one of the most even keeled and open-minded trainers I've ever met in my life. And I think that's one of his superpowers, even though he thinks I can't rucksack. Anyway, whatever. But so here, we're just going to go through. That's an internal joke, Patrick and I, and we're never going to be prove who's right or wrong now, because now I'm way too old and broken. But so anyway, as we go through, so you can kind of see, we're going to break it down. What is it? Again, it's a tool. What are you going to look at the tool for? What reasons do you need this tool? And Clint and I, part of our conversation yesterday was just that realistic. Okay, well, there's a big difference from shooting, you know, at 100 and 200 meters than there is at 500 and 600. And it's a whole nother set of conversations, and it's a whole nother set of analysis and tools for that, and how you're going to modify your tools. So, you know, this may not be what people think it's going to be, but so we're going to do that, talk about systems a little bit, you know, have a little bit of fun. We might get to this, but some of the alternative ways in which, you know, shoot just means what tool are you going to use to either defend yourself or procure food with, right? And there's all kinds of different things in here. So, and here, like, I think shoot part of this, and I just realized it now that I don't have in there, is fishing poles should be in there, even though that might have to do with food procurement, but it is a way in which you're going to procure your food. And you know, it's another tool you're going to have to master. And there's all kinds of parts, components, and different environmental considerations, X, Y, and Z. Okay, so that's what we're going to do for shoot here. Let's just start it off right here, just on this kind of opening slide. So again, kind of making a joke, but then I'm going to bring it over to Patrick. You know, if your thought is you need to have a weapons platform in order to defend yourself, and boys and girls, that's why, in my humble opinion, why so many people are pushing to have, you know, to try to ignore the Second Amendment or repeal it or make caveats to it. To me, the Second Amendment is very clear. You have the right as a human being. You have a big R God-given right to self-defense. I personally believe that the founding fathers also believe that. And, you know, everybody say, well, you don't need a this and you don't need a that. Really? Do you know how many people in our history up until modern history actually did have their own warships, and they did have their own cannons, and they had all that kind of stuff? So, and we just got Clinton. All right. So that's perfect timing. Clint.
Hey, what's happening?
Hey, now, if you don't mind, because it has been a while since the first one, just in case people don't remember who you are, but you caught it perfect. We already did our little intro. I kind of just showed everybody what we're going to do for just the shoot part, and we were just getting ready to dive into it. But before I do that, why don't I just hide this for a second, and let's let you come back on and remind everybody who you are. Oops, I'm sorry, I just did that wrong. Yeah, and remind everybody who you are, sir.
Okay, so I've been on the podcast here a couple times. 25 years military, most of that in special operations, Rangers, special forces, done some time as a deputy sheriff or reserve guy here in the Southeast. And I guess we'll preface this one thing. One of the things that Mark and I were talking about before jumping back on here to chat a little bit. One of the things that I was involved with when we get into the shoot, move, communicate stuff. One of the main things I worked with a group within the Army called the Asymmetric Warfare Group, which was primarily a firearms training event, and it was a way to kind of shake the Cold War mentality out of the senior leadership of how we were training people to shoot. And Mark and I got a little bit into that. And anybody that's, you know, shot on a pop-up range where you zero a weapon at 25 meters, but you really don't ever go down range to confirm what your groups look like. We'll get a little bit farther into that, but we spoke a lot about that and how to train people in shooting. So I think we'll have a chance to talk about that a little bit, but that's a little bit about my background. I've been on this on podcast a couple times, and excited to jump in here wherever you are at and start swinging.
Well, your timing was perfect, and somebody just referenced you as the film star. Clint is the film star, right? So yeah. Hey, but so we were just actually getting ready to do shoot. So I just showed everybody the slide, part of the slide deck that covers this category. But as we kind of talked about yesterday, and Patrick and I were talking about a little while ago, you know, I'm just going to open this up. We don't have to follow the slides, and that's not what we're really doing. But so here's where we just were. So your timing's perfect. So again, as we were kind of getting into this, like, you know, these are just tools in your toolbox. That's how I look at it. There's tools in your toolkit. Every tool is different. Everybody uses tools differently. Not all tools work for all people, even though that you could have different tools for the same job, but you might prefer a different type of tool. But then, if you challenge yourself and open your mind, you ask yourself, well, what is it that I'm trying to use this tool for? So again, I'm not there. I don't know what you think the scenario is for which you have to be more self-reliant, more prepared. But I will say that in most of those scenarios, especially if you find yourself having to be more self-reliant and living off the land, you're going to want some type of shooting. And that could either be for personal defense, it could be for hunting, it could be for offensive operations, et cetera, et cetera. But, along those lines, if you're getting into offense, and then, I'm sure, and maybe this will be a good joke for Patrick and Clint to kind of jump in on, is like, there's no such thing as a fair fight, boys and girls. And if if you've ever really been in fights before, and maybe you're like, well, I don't believe in that. But where there's life on the line, I want to stack that deck and make it, 99.9% probable that I kick your ass. That's my ultimate goal, right? So, right, little stupid joke, rules for a gunfight. Bring a gun, preferably bring at least 2, and then bring all your friends with guns. All right, just a little humor as we get into it. But now here's where we really want to jump into the meat and potatoes of the shoot side. Again, I've already said this. What are you trying to do? Are you just trying to put food on the table? Are you trying to protect yourself? Are you trying to ensure that your liberties and freedoms aren't encroached upon or stolen from you, et cetera, et cetera? Joe Biden, has made the joke that, all you 2A people, you guys need fighter jets if you really, Joe Biden? Is that, that kind of seemed like you're threatening. And there's been other politicians saying that, well, we'll just drop bombs on you and kill you guys. Well, okay. Well, if that's how your government is thinking of you and that's how they're addressing you and that's what they're saying politicians are saying they're willing to do to you, well, then maybe you do have to take a step back and maybe your daddy's 410 isn't going to be enough. And then ask your question, is that why so many people say, oh, you don't need anything more than a 410? So right there, let's come to Patrick first and then let's come to Clint. Where do you want to come in? And now, Patrick, I know the unarmed side is another part of it that you're big into as well, but where do you want to just kind of start initially? What's the point of intersection for the shoot side?
All right. Yeah, I'll kind of kick off a little bit. As far as I look at, shoot, move, communicate, medicate, that's like how we roll with, military tactics, right? Like those are the capabilities we're trying to build individually, collectively, that type of thing. It's applicable to everybody listening on here now as well. So I like to categorize shoot in more of the realm of fight. How would you fight? I know we're going to talk about, using firearms for food and stuff like that. And let me just kind of preface this by saying I'm a huge firearms fan. At one time held a very high proficiency in them. And, I still try to maintain that. I try to keep the edge sharp to a certain degree. However, I will say that I think a lot of people look at weapons in terms of like they're going to be your magic talisman and your savior. That's not true. When things go bad, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to be, hit with a wave of, oh God, somebody's actually trying to hurt me or kill me. That's not a normal day. So you're going to get an adrenaline dump, and there is a level of fear there. You have to be able to overcome the fear. So going into the fight realm, learning how to, number one, as I always preach, get yourself in shape and try to stay in shape to the best of your ability. We all got, different, ailments and capabilities and disabilities that we have to work around. But that's number one, gonna save you from anything. And then, start looking at ways that you could, physically, protect yourself without the weapon. Let's say that you have a weapon, but you can't access it, or, so you need time to use a weapon. You need the space to use it. If somebody's crammed up on you or you're on the ground, you can't access it. And accessibility, where is it? Oh, hey, some guy just broke in my house. Well, my shotgun's, in the back room, but I can't get there right now, right? So you have to have unarmed skill. And more importantly, you have to have the willingness psychologically to say, hey, I will cause harm to another human being under the right set of circumstances. And that's if you're going to try to harm me or family members of the people I'm around, do you have that capability? And will you give yourself, permission in advance to use an extreme level of violence against another human being? A lot of people haven't thought about that. They just think, hey, I have this sexy firearm platform that I can get, and I can smoke things, nice and static at a range. That's not reality, folks. So I'll kind of lead with that piece. But understanding, number one, your mind is your first weapon. Your body's like, you carry that stuff with you all the time. You can get it through TSA. You can, go anywhere you want to. If you're in the UK, I'm in a lot of places over in Europe and places around the world, you're not allowed to carry a firearm. So now what do you do? So that's for me, that's step one. So I'll kind of leave that one alone for you guys.
Clint, you want to just follow up on that or go in your own direction? I think one of the things, the only thing I want to add to what Patrick said, and there's a couple different ways to you can say this, but distance, right? So to that point, distance equals time, and those two things combined, that's what equals opportunity. You know, so if people don't understand what Patrick just said, you could be carrying concealed, but it's, you know, you're in northern Minnesota and it's under 4 layers of clothes, and then there's somebody who's within 3 yards. You know, maybe you are the world's best at draw stroke from that distance and within that time. But, you know, again, the Tooler drill, you know, which I don't even agree with, that's set 21 feet. That doesn't even give most people enough time to access a concealed. And go watch Danny Inosanto Fear the Knife videos. I've mentioned this way in the past. These are people, you know, law enforcement officers carrying open. And to Patrick's point, the brain gravitates towards gun, where maybe you should be thinking about something else a little bit defensive or offensive to create that time, that separation, or that distance, that separation, because that buys you another second, and that's a long time, boys and girls. And I'm sure Clint will talk about this, but that in that 1 or 2 more seconds, maybe that's where you are going to a weapon, or maybe you should be looking at a different option altogether. Clint, I'm not 100% sure if you want to follow up on that or go in your own direction, but take it away, sir.
I'll jump on this, just kind of go down the list of what we were looking at. You know, reliability. Of course, everybody has preference. You know, what is it you're trying to do? What is it, what you're, you know, if you're bugging in, bugging out, you know, I'm getting to be an older guy. You know, I was a stud in my 20s, 30s or whatever, but ounces make pounds. So, I mean, I have literally started to downsize everything, man. If I don't need it, it's gone. You know, shoot, move, communicate. And if it don't fall closely under those directives, I don't need it. And like I said, bugging out, bugging in, how far am I going away? And then you start looking at, what are my capabilities? What is it that I'm trying to do? You know, just this general area right around me. Mark and I talked about this a little bit, and I saw it all the time in the military when I was teaching the combat application training course. You have guys that come out there and they're very proficient with the rifle. But they've never shot a pistol. You would think everybody in the military knows how to shoot a pistol and knows how to shoot a rifle, but that's not true. And it's exactly the same thing on the law enforcement side. A lot of guys are pretty good with a pistol. We're not good with a pistol, but then you get a rifle and you start getting 150, 200 meters, 300 meters. You're starting to push the capability of the natural ability of a shooter that hasn't been around firearms a lot. 300 meters is pretty good distance, depending on what the widgets are that you have on that weapon. You know, a variable powered optic, a fixed power optic, you know, iron sights. Yeah. So, I mean, and what I learned a lot was, of course, I want redundancy and everything. So the first thing that goes on my rifle is the iron sights. It's the first thing I train with. It's the first thing that gets dialed in. I like CCOs, close combat optics, for certain things out to about 200 meters. And then you can get into the semantics of a 200 meter zero as opposed to a 300 meter zero, and all the semantics in that, which there's a lot of debate. But once you get that thing set in, and Mark and I talked a little bit about an ACOG. I've seen people take an ACOG and try to dial it in on a 200 meter zero. Why are you doing that? You know, the optic itself is made for 300 meter zero. That's what you should be using it for. Use the equipment the right way. So if you have a shooter that has fairly good natural ability and focus to get out on the range and dial that weapon system in, that you can make a well-placed first round shot. Because what you don't want to do is exceed your capability, and you could have stayed quiet and hidden and allowed somebody to move through the area that could have been a superior force. Now you've taken a shot and you've missed it, and now they're advancing on you. Now they're going to start trying to cordon you in and start blocking you in. So you may want to just, if it's outside your capability level, don't do it. Know what your capability is and train a lot. So you got a general purpose rifleman that's good out to about 300 meters. if you're really good and you have a lot of focus and you've had time to work on each one of those ingredients in your recipe, that it comes out tasting good. And I'm talking about barrel, ammunition, optics, and it could go everything to a collapsible buttstock that's got a lot of wiggle in it. There's a lot of slop in your gun. There's some problems there, and you need to iron those ingredients out until it comes out right. 300 meters out to about 600 meters, designated rifleman with a fixed power or variable powered optic that you can make a well-placed shot. 5.56, 7.62, and then starting to get into all the exotic new ammos that people are playing with. I like to keep it simple: 9mm, 5.56, 7.62, and some shotgun rounds. Other than that, those are things that you're going to find plentiful. Anywhere you find, you're going to find those. But when you start getting into these new ammos, new barrels, then you're minimizing the amount of stuff because it's exotic, slightly exotic.
And before you go too far away from that, though, but that was a great point, and I just want to emphasize it. So again, these are tools in the toolkit, and what you just heard Clint just say, which, you know, again, hey, you do you, you know, and maybe you're not as concerned about, you know, a force on force type of conflict or type of engagement, and you're really, hey, you know, I'm more shooting from one ridge line to another ridge line at mountain goats or whatever my food source is, and maybe there is a different platform out there in a different round. But that doesn't take away from what Clint just said. And if you are that person who does big game hunting in that type of capacity, you know exactly what he's saying. This isn't like I just, you know, one of my favorite stories, bow hunting. And this isn't quite the same thing, but I'm about to go the first bow hunt of the season with a buddy. And this was years ago. And the guy never even went and threw any rounds. He never even threw any arrows, never confirmed his pins. And he was going to go out there and possibly take a 40, 50 yard, 30, 40, 50 yard shot with an arrow, which doesn't have the same ballistic, you know, and kinetic energy as a round does. But a lot of modern bows, you know, you're flinging arrows at about 300 feet per second, a lot of kinetic energy behind that. But if you haven't gone out and if you don't know what, you know, again, same thing, you know, how heavy are my arrows? What's my draw length? You know, what's my environment, X, Y, and Z. And I think that goes to Clint's point. These are tools, and they all have different pros and cons. And if you're going to use that tool, you got to get out there and be serious about it. I mean, my final comment, and I'll turn it back over to Patrick and Clint, not to maybe I'm sidebarring us here, but so many people, I'm just going to do this and I'm just going to practice CQB, and no idea what the capability or the functionality of the weapon is, how it's going to function, how well it's going to perform, you know, as Clint said, you know, and what's the more realistic thing you're doing? Are you really taking 300 to 500 meter shots with your long rifle in that type of scenario? You know, are you trying, is that point fire? Is that area fire? Are you just trying to break contact? If you're taking those shots and if you haven't honed that skill, then that first round is a miss. And as Clint just said, well, guess what? The other guy gets to play in this game too. And now somebody's going to be firing, maneuvering on you. So this isn't just the cool guy. I just bought this and therefore I'm Johnny Rambo. There's a shit ton more that goes into it, boys and girls.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I guess I'll say this last thing and flip it back over to Patrick for his thoughts. Everything comes down to proficiency. You know, how often are you going out and shooting? You know, you can have done this for a large portion of your life, but for the last 6 months to a year, you ain't hit the range. You're rusty, you know, no matter how much you've shot, and you will get it back quicker the more experience you have, but it doesn't matter. You're still rusty. You got to recheck PCIs, PCCs. You got to recheck those weapons, make sure everything's tight, make sure it's clean. You know, all those things have to be checked to, again, make sure each ingredient to that recipe is ready to go and you're dialed in and you're proficient. Man, if you're not hitting the range, and I have that all the time, Mark brought this up before in a conversation we had, you know, you get a whole bunch of ladies out on a range, you're doing a ladies firearms course, and you have to look at them and say, are you ready to shoot somebody? And be serious about it. And it takes them a second to think about it, what they're training to do. You know, you're talking about learning a firearm to take somebody's life. Are you ready for that? And make sure you make them think about it real good for a minute, you know, and then you do your training and you do your stuff. But then after that, you can go to one class, but you got to get out there in a range and stay proficient, or you're no good, or you're a liability to anybody that's in the house with you or anybody around you in Walmart or wherever you may be, there's an active shooter, you could now be a danger to others because you're not proficient. You haven't been training.
And that's the ego at the door, boys and girls. You know, you just saw me raise my, my hand when Clint was talking. Hey, I've got 30 plus years of doing this, and if you take my childhood, I've probably got, call it 44 years, 45 years of my life around weapons, but I haven't been able to get out and brush off the cobwebs, and so there's a lot of rust there. So I already know I'm entering into whatever equation it could be. And I don't rifle hunt, I bow hunt, right? So I haven't even rifle hunted, for even a longer period of time. So yeah, there's a lot of rust there, and you got to knock it off, and you got to smash that rust off. So thanks for saying that, Clint, because it's true. And again, check your ego at the door, boys. And just that on that note, I just two things. So Clint threw out an acronym, PCI, PCC. He's just talking about checks and inspections. Pre-combat inspection, pre-combat checks. He's just basically saying you've got a list. And it's not just like some fabricated bullshit list. You actually have a list of all these components and subcomponents and all these tasks and the reason behind these tasks that you have to go down, and you have to make sure you're performing, or that you have to up check and say, yep, it's in good status and it's a fresh battery and it's properly lubricated and X, Y, and Z. It's not like, and I've known people to do that. They come in, they've been out hunting all day. They come in and, you kind of let your weapons platform sweat, whether it's a bow, you've been outside, let it sweat, but then you got to rub that, wipe that down, get all that water off it, give it a good coat of oil, and I know people who just throw it right in their gun safe. And I'm like, I don't ever want to hang around you. You're an idiot. So,
yeah, the way I travel, and I'll toss this to Patrick, the way that I travel, if I'm depending on how far away from my home I'm going, I see things going on the news that start making me get a little nervous. I go grab my stuff out and just go through it and check it. Let me check these batteries in my flashlight. Let me check it in my optic. All magazines are still full, topped off. Everything's where it's supposed to be at. Put it back in the bag. I did a quick check. I feel comfortable that the last time I did this wasn't 6 months ago. It was a week ago.
And those PCI should be for everything. That's even, back to the previous episode. If you're looking at food, you're rotating your food.
Can you hear me, Patrick?
I got you. Yeah, I think Mark dropped there for a second. So while we got some dead air, I'll go ahead and kind of ride off of what you just said, because I think it's so important. So about 6 months ago, I'm a former SWAT member too. I get invited by some guys I used to be on the team with. Hey, let's go shooting. I hadn't practiced, even picked the things up for the better part of a year. Needless to say,
that was the weirdest thing, boys. Dude, I got full. It just shut the whole program down on my side. Good to go that you guys were still there. Not even sure how that happened, but
yeah, you're good.
Yeah. So anyway, you guys continue with what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was just bizarre. It totally just dropped me. And it, on my side, it showed that we just dropped the whole live stream. That's what it showed on my side. So.
Are we still up?
Yeah, we stayed on.
As far as I'm seeing, hey, can somebody just leave a chat in the live? So everything is showing that we are still live, but if I can get somebody to leave a chat, just anybody make a comment, and then we'll know we are still live. I'm not 100% sure. The software is saying we are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, Blake, who just got back, he says, yeah, we're still live, and learn me some. Okay, so we're still good to go. So thanks, guys. Got it. All right, everybody. So Patrick and Clint, whatever you guys were talking about, please continue.
Okay. Yeah. So I was just saying, I went to the range about 6 months or a year ago with some former SWAT teammates. And, I don't go to the range and just, shoot for the sake of shooting. I have I have several diagnostic drills I shoot. Let's see where I'm at. Let's see how much rust I need to knock off, that sort of thing. I hadn't been practicing for the better part of a year before that. So needless to say, my performance was ass. It was not good. So I decided, hey, you know what? I went home and cleaned my weapons, and I decided, okay, let's say every 2 weeks, or at least every 2 to 3 weeks, I'm going to pull out the rifle, the pistol, and everything else, make sure everything's clean, make sure the batteries are good to go. And I'm also going to take that opportunity to spend, let's say 15, 20 minutes tops of dry fire. Just practicing, a little bit of transition, presentation, some mag changes, things like that. And lo and behold, the last 2 times I've gone, I've actually performed pretty well. So all this stuff that we're talking about, it is perishable. And if you think you go to a high-speed course taught by some super killers, and that's going to last forever, it's not. I mean, we came from that world, so it does go away. It is perishable, but it's also for me, we take a look at as far as, and I'm glad that Clint brought up, not just the skill maintenance, but also what's the application. So if I, see something cool on at some firearms magazine or something on, Instagram or wherever, and I say, hey, that's a badass sniper rifle, and I live in the city, what's the application for that? I mean, is it a I don't know, discussion piece in my home? Because anybody that knows anything is, it's going to ask me, hey, where the hell are you using that? So everything to me is application. Think about realistic scenarios that something might happen. And then ultimately it all comes down to what Clint mentioned also is, are you willing to take a life? Because you're going to, again, like I said, you're going to be scared. Are you willing to say, okay, no? Do you have that indignation in you to say, not today? You're going and not me. And do you have the willingness to pull the trigger or stab somebody or bite them or, using hyper violence? Do you have that in you? And if you haven't, thought about that, maybe it's time you should.
If you ask somebody that question in a very stoic way, mm-hmm. and they hesitate to even answer the question, when you see the download bar start to stick, they need to start asking that question to themselves a lot, because if they're going to freeze you even asking the question standing out on the range, what are you going to do when you're standing there's a dark figure standing in your doorway, and they're coming to take something that you've got, the biter.
Yep.
Just 2 quick additions. We're sorry to kind of everybody just jump back, but I just wanted to be able to finish. So when we were talking about those PCIs, those pre-combat inspections, that isn't just your weapons platforms. It's everything. It's your vehicles. It's your food storage. It's your communication. It's rotating that gear. It's maintaining that gear. Just think about this. Maybe even put a little calendar like, hey, at the beginning of the month, you take your portable, not your jumper cables, but here in northern Minnesota, a lot of people have their own, the small devices so you can jump your own vehicle. Well, that requires an electrical charge, and as Clint said, I carry a flashlight, okay, well, when was the last time you rotated out the D cell, the batteries? When was the last time you charged up your jumper cable system or your energy, your energy bank that you carry with you that you can use to charge your phone or your laptop? Boys and girls, those PCIs, and that actually should have gone, and I'm glad you just brought that up. So when I did this, Clint, I wasn't really trying to be on that military side, but I should include that somewhere at the very end or the very beginning, because that thought process applies to everything we're talking about. And then just the last thing you guys were mentioning. So when I was teaching, so I was a certified instructor. When I was teaching, to your guys' point, these are just tools. And I'm glad, I can't remember if it was Patrick who brought it up or Clint. You live in the city and you buy an AR platform. Okay, well, what's the penetration? What's the muzzle velocity? What's that doing? Because it's just sheetrock between you and the next apartment over. So Charlie Manson kicks in your door and he's racing down the hall. You've never trained. You haven't thought it through. Patrick's point, you're going to be doing adrenaline dumps. This isn't the flat range. You crack off 6 shots. You hit them twice and the other 4 miss, and they over penetrate. The only thing between you and little Jimmy's, brain housing group is maybe a 2x4, which is every 16 inches. So that's a large area where that round can go through. So maybe the tool for you for home defense isn't a long gun. Maybe it should be a shotgun. Maybe it should be, a different caliber, smaller caliber handgun. Maybe you're not good at racking the slide or manipulating the slide on a handgun. Maybe you should have a wheel gun. To Clint's point, and I'm sure, Patrick, you guys just were saying it, and maybe that's my final comment to get you guys to come back on the shoot. These are tools, and there's so many things that go into each one of these, and you have to take all this into consideration. And so, therefore, if it's a survival or shit hits the fan or a self-reliance, is an AR really the platform of choice for you? I mean, if you're not worried about force on force or direct action, okay, well, then maybe you need a good, 45-70 or, again, a 300 Win Mag, whatever you're doing with a good optic, because you're going to be because where you live, you can't get within 700 yards of a mule deer. Whereas where we live, that's not that's totally because you'll never see an animal from 700 yards away because there's only like, 10 meters, 30 meters of, visibility through the undergrowth, up here in the boreal forest. So maybe you're looking at a different type of gun that's got a different ballistic that can push through a couple branches. Same with your bow, same with your handgun, et cetera, et cetera. Did I just help in the conversation, guys, or did I just come?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I'll throw one more thing in there as far as the firearm thing and the application, right? So where do violent acts take place? I mean, what do you do with your AR when you're at the gas station and somebody tries to carjack you, or you're in the Walmart parking lot? One of the best trainers that I had the pleasure of working with was a guy named Kelly McCann, former Marine. I think a lot of people probably know him, and I highly respected him. So I asked the question, which some people kind of retract that, and I would retract if somebody asked me that question too. But hey, what's your favorite firearm? And he's like, well, I think the best firearm, and my favorite firearm is the one I carry all the time. So he stood up and he had some jeans on. And he had like a pocket clip, and I thought it was a knife. And he pulled out this small J-frame, like 38. And he's like, I carry that with me all the time. And if you think about it, something's going to happen. It's going to happen up close. It's a revolver, so I don't have to worry about malfunctions. I just click, 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 click. And, I've, created that time, space, and distance for me to get away or reassess, So, I thought that was fantastic. And that's applicable to everybody. Just think about, where do violent activities usually occur, and what are you going to have available to you? So I thought that was just genius.
Yeah, keep going. Sorry, guys, because I'm just getting back to this. I didn't want to interrupt too much, but yeah, when it dumped me, it dumped everything. So
okay.
I was surprised we were even still alive. So let me just get caught up. Clint, you want to add to that right there then, sir?
Oh, gosh. Man, these are things I can get really wordy on, but yeah, I mean, an everyday carry, just like what Patrick said. I mean, I like to keep it small. I have one of these 43 Glock 43 that I carry now. The ergonomics are very similar to a 19 or a 17, which are my preference. And a full out large capacity handgun like a 17 is what I like to use to train, what I like to use to carry. But if I'm just running to the grocery store and there was a long time there that I didn't carry all the time, but we're just in a time period right now. I don't leave home without it. I mean, every time I go out now, because you just don't know what's coming. And I'm always going to make it to where I can get back to home base. I can get back to my family, and whatever that takes. So yeah, what you need daily as opposed to what you need in the first 72 hours of what you're going to need long term, and be able to resupply. I have a really nice little 1022 that's a little semi-automatic, but that's my procurement gun. Small game, stuff like that. Doesn't make a lot of noise. Carry a lot of ammo. Those are great survival guns. Just a small nail driver of a 22. Those are great. So they don't cost a lot of money, and you can have a lot of ammo for them. So
I just want to add to that and bring it back over to Clint and Patrick. So to me, the cool guy word way back in the day was interoperability. So if you just take what Clint just said, and if you just start thinking about it, well, okay, you're carrying a weapon that's an exotic round, like you're shooting some 6.5 or whatever. Can you just swap ammo with your buddy? Is it easy to procure on the battlefield or out in the environment? So when you really start looking at it, and Clint's already kind of alluded to a lot of this, and there's a lot of people like 7.62, and that is probably a somewhat, not popular, but it's a popular round. It'll be a little bit more easy to procure in the environment. If it's a red dawn scenario, maybe your enemies are using it. But anyway, you just think about it: 9mm, 410, 12 gauge, 45, 30, et cetera. So just go back and look at your tools, and then just, think about that interoperability, both in the terms of, if Patrick is carrying a 40 and I'm carrying a 9, can Patrick and I throw magazines to each other in a crisis? No, and that's just more logistics. That's more stuff to carry. And that's why I like what Clint just said, when you start looking at some of your procurement tools, well, okay, 22 long rifle. That's a lot of Cuban weight that you can, that's a lot of 22 long rifle before you're getting too worried about Cuban and weight. Now, even if it's just with you on your personal, your rolling gear, that's a lot of ammo that you could carry in that sense right there. And I'll just ask you this. I heard somebody once who was being an idiot, and they're like, oh, well, we're just shooting 22. And, you know, my knee-jerk reaction was like, let me shoot you in the head with a 22. You tell me how that's going to work out. Like, oh, it's just a 22. So again, that's just another idiot who doesn't even understand how weapons work and what calibers are. And, you know, like, and I wasn't going to sit and say, yeah, okay, it's just a 22. Really? So are you implying that I shouldn't have been worried and you guys can shoot me and what, it bounces off of me? Is that what you think? Because it's a little tiny. Oh,
yeah, that's one of those debates that are, you know, the 9mm to 45 debate. And I used to love shooting a 45, but when you're on the range all day, you know, your wrists get tired, and every time you fire that pistol, that's a little bit more ammo that you got to shoot expense wise over and over and over again. So I started shooting a 9mm, and there's that big debate on caliber. But if you can put the round on the off switch, it doesn't matter whether it's a 22 or a 45.
Patrick?
Yeah, and like you're saying, Clint, Price, when you're, you know, we've been blessed to work for organizations where, you know, hey, you just go to the, you know, the Connex box and pull out another crate of ammo. People don't have that ability. You're paying for it, and that cost goes up, which means you have less. So yeah, that has to be taken into account.
Proficiency goes back to proficiency, Patrick. You need, you know, there was a time when, like Mark and like you, that we taught firearms training that, shoot, I was spending 2-3 days a week on the range shooting. My proficiency was high. Yep. And people watch me shoot and they're like, my God, how do you get like that? And I'll tell you a funny little story. I had a buddy of mine that went to the unit, you know, and I was asking him, I was in group at the time, and I was, you know, hey, you know, could you teach me some of the stuff that they're teaching you out there and make you guys shoot like that? And he goes, there's no secret. It's just lots of money and ammo and lots of time on range. Yeah. That's it, you know. And boy, when you do have a job like that where somebody's supplying you ammo, and, you know, you can stand out there and explore, you know, self-exploration in shooting, and you learn how to really know what that gun can do. That's the very best that you can get when you can spend a lot of time on the range and just build the proficiency.
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah.
My final comment on this before we move over to the next category is, again, these are tools in the toolbox. You know, there's all kinds of funny ways to look at it, but not everybody's going to use these tools the same. Now, this is just obviously this is a training weapon here. If people don't know, it's a Glock, it's a SRG pistol, right? But
great training weapon.
If this platform doesn't work for you, so like, you know, kind of back to something Clint said, you know, I will make sacrifices on how I carry concealed because, and it's not that I have huge man mitts, but whenever I'm into a subcompact, I can't get a very effective grip. It just never really works with me. And matter of fact, on my weapons, I'll do what's called a strap reduction. This is the back strap. I'll cut this so it's more flat, and I'll do a beaver tail extension. So no matter what, under duress, fighting through my clothes, sweaty hands, I'm already coming in and establishing a really good grip, because how I kind of grew up is grip is half the battle of accuracy. But I'll make that because it's just a tool, though. So kind of what Clinton's saying. So I need to find the tools that work out best for my hand, because, and subcompacts just aren't one of them. So then I've got to make considerations on how I carry concealed, and you know, and honestly, and I'm not saying I'm going to do this, but I've been having my own mental conversations with myself about Minnesota's an open carry state. There's all kinds of dangers and troubles that go with that, but that is the law of the land. And anyway, so that's just even that right there, boys. We just talked about shoot. There are so many variables and so many things to take in consideration. We could have just done an 8-hour class just on discussing that subject right there. But before we move it into move, let's go Patrick and then Clint for final comments on shoot. I'm going to pull up the slide deck in case there's something that you might want to respond to here. But what do you guys? Well, besides that guy, you know, use your good eye. That's I've always thought that one.
Yeah, no, so I'll go ahead and jump on that one for a second. But as far as you know, firearms for folks that, and I'll include, you know, some law enforcement and regular military folks into this category too. Like going to the range and doing your basic qualification. That's basic marksmanship. That is not like real training, right? So that just shows that you've got the basic capabilities to hit a target when you're still in the target still. You need to, again, back to the thing I always lean on, try to, maintain your physical abilities, because you need to become a gunfighter. In order to become a gunfighter, you need to be able to move, right? Because if you think I'm going to stand here, and draw down with some guy on the street and we're just going to see who shoots each other first. No, back to the no fair fights, right? I'm going to move. I'm going to get to cover as fast as I can. Then I'm going to blaze somebody down if they're in the open. That requires, some mentality. That also requires some physical capabilities as well. So if you're going to go down the path and you really want to commit to, being a firearms aficionado, go all the way with it and become a gunfighter. Don't just become somebody who's a gun collector.
Yeah, I'll jump on that one. I was out here, use a law enforcement training range out here, and what I was teaching a lot of people is I see three deficiencies in most shooters. There's speed, accuracy, and mobility. And those are the three things that you really have to find your deficiency of what's going to be. So speed and accuracy is like having a handful of sand and you're going to dump one of those into the other. You're either going to be, fast and not accurate, or accurate and slow. But if you can't move, if you can't run 100 meters, then run 200 meters, then run up 5 flights of stairs and still have some speed and accuracy, you're not going to hit anything. You can lay some suppressive fire, but that's about it. And I had a fifth special forces group buddy with me out at the range. And we were doing, 5 rounds at 25, 5 rounds at 50, 5 rounds at 75, 5 rounds at 100, run out to 200 meters, and then run up a rappelling tower that had barricades on each level. Man, by the time we ran that thing, people were gassed out. And that right there is probably the biggest thing, is a combat chassis. Are you taking care of yourself? Can you run a little bit? Can you maintain some cardio, at least a reasonable amount? Because that is what's going to stop you from being able to be a gunfighter if you can't move, because you're going to have to get off the X. You're going to have to move.
Amen. My last comment, kind of going back to something that I kind of overlooked, but Clinton, you and I were talking about this the other day. Patrick, you and I have talked about this, but so here, boys and girls, I've never grew up goose hunting, right? So I've grouse hunted. So, shotguns, different loads, different chokes, very familiar with that. But goose hunting, was relatively new to me. I started goose hunting again, well, I shouldn't say again, but for the first time really a few years ago. And just to this overall point on the shoot side and knowing your platforms, again, it's not just knowing the platform, but it's knowing all the little intricacies, what type of choke, what type of round. So I'm sitting here and, and I was, I think I was just after my back surgery. So I was lucky to be able to hunt where I was. So it was, imagine driving in and then just walking a little bit and there's my blind and here's this big open area. So it wasn't like I was doing anything super physical as we're kind of talking about, because I just wasn't able. But, I'm looking at where I'm going to be calling these geese in and where I'm going to set up my decoys. And then it's like, okay, I've got to take this platform I'm using, this shotgun. Okay, I'm going to use this choke because it's supposed to be good for, this range, and it's going to have my pattern this. Now I'm going to run a couple rounds through it. Do that. Go out there, examine what those rounds are doing at 20 yards. Do that again at 30 yards. Do that again at 40 yards. Okay, this round is really falling off at 40 yards. This one's good at all the way up to 50 yards with this choke. All right, now try a different choke, a modified. And then work through those platforms. Know your equipment. That's my kind of final comment right there on the shoot side.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on. Let me bring this back up. Hey, and if anyone's got any comments, again, we're doing this. This is, there are no observers here, right? So, if you got a question or comment for Patrick or Clint or whomever, bring in. We're going to I've already showed this. We're going to skip over this, but that's just another thing that you should be considering, because, every time you press that trigger and expend a round of ammo, well, how are you getting resupplied? So you might have to look at other ways in which you can do food procurement or other defense. I kind of threw this in there because, again, zombie apocalypse was a big thing. And here, I'll just get rid of this real quickly, kind of just a little story. But one of the things I've never liked about any of the zombie movies, they're zombies. They're not manipulating weapons platforms or anything. Why are you sitting there and just dumping your limited ammo, you're a very vital resource, and you don't ever see anybody doing reloads or anything. So where's all this ammo coming from? Eventually it's going to disappear. I'm like, why aren't they adopting Roman, or ancient things? Why aren't they, like the Spartans, shields up front, lock, holding there, and then the next rank is just coming over the top with spears and spearing zombies in the head and saving, and then the weapons are, if you're fail safe, if you have a breakthrough or if you got to stem a breakthrough or whatever. So just consider, maybe some other things, whatever it is that you're trying to perfect or what you're preparing for. And not all the time, all these cool guy things aren't necessarily the tools that you might want to rely upon, or put into your toolbox. So just kind of saying. All right. Mobility equals survivability. And this is just a joke about how cheap gas was back in the day. And it wasn't, because the joke was, even if you go back to the Obama era and what gas was like and housing was like back then. But anyway, you got to have mobility. So I'm just going to share everybody the slides we're talking about here. Considerations. Okay, so mobility, boom, and I'll just kind of bring everybody up. So how are you going to move? So if you think about it, when you're looking at your survival situation, where do I want to go? Where am I now? How am I going to get to this other place where I want to go? And what are the obstacles that are going to try to work against me or stop me from getting to that place? And, and conversely, and if you're saying, well, I'm going to bug in, well, then your movement considerations may not be as much. But to Patrick's point earlier, well, where do most, defensive shootings take place? You're home, on your way to the grocery store, on your way to work, at work. I mean, so in other words, I'm assuming that you may not be sitting in your house and everything works out perfect for you when something happens. You might be at your job and you're 30 miles away, and maybe the event is a natural event and it's a coronal mass ejection. And now all the modern vehicles don't work. And now you're 30 miles away from home. So that's really the consideration here. Where do I want to be? Where am I now? How am I going to get there? And what are the obstacles or the dangers or the pitfalls that are to prevent me from reaching my goal? Patrick or Clint, who wants to kind of jump in on the move part first?
I'll jump. I'll go ahead and start.
Okay.
Again, we spend a lot of time on the military side, especially in, the combat arms realm, moving with our feet. Your feet, you learn how to take care of them. Make sure that you have a good, foot system, because, hey, guess what? That's your first thing you're going to do. If that vehicle that you're counting on goes down, well, you better be able to step it out for a long way and get to a point of safety, right? So that's the first piece. Obviously, if you're in I think the go-to would be, the primary would be, hey, I'm going to use my personal vehicle. What kind of vehicle do you own? And let's say it is capable, and things are bad. We need to evacuate. Let's say it's a natural disaster, hurricane. We're getting out of here. This thing came on us really quick, and now everybody's trying to leave. Are we taking like main roads? Are we taking side roads? Are we taking country roads and gravel and stuff like that? And what goes along with that is learning how to navigate. What if I can't? What if the cell towers are shot down and or they're just inoperable, and I can't count on Garmin or Google Maps or whatever? Do I know my cardinal directions and how to stay on those, right? These are key things that are kind of ingrained in us. But I think everybody can benefit from like literally taking a look at that stuff. How many people in their vehicle have like the old school Rand McNally maps? Those are going to be key. If everything else goes down, it's always nice to have some kind of reference to let me know, hey, I've reached a major intersection, so that we would call that an en route checkpoint in our land nav world, but that's the same thing on the vehicles. Are we, what's our fuel capability? How long can we go? Can we get other vehicles along the way? Should I take secondary, tertiary vehicles with me? Do I have the ability to throw a motorcycle in the back of the truck or a bicycle? How long can I go with that? What do I need to maintain that thing and keep it going? So a lot of thought goes into that, but taking it all the way back to your own personal capabilities of, hey, how long can I move? Or if I'm taking family members with me, what's our limitations on how far we can move and what kind of terrain we can cross?
Interesting. Yeah. I thought on that, and Patrick just brought it up. One thing that I like to scale, your man pack. If you got your backpack, you're moving through the woods or whatever. Always like to keep a little map case, whatever. Have a topo map for right in my general area. Nice compass that I've got that I can use. Very thin, lightweight. But Patrick just brought it up, and this is something I always keep in my map case. And they sell these, a miniature atlas. These are great because if you're ever traveling and you have to handrail roads, you can basically handrail a road and you have all of the roads you can stay on it. You see a road sign, you can check where you're at. And instead of having a full-size atlas, these little mini atlases are great, and it's got all 50 states in it. You can throw it in your map case. These are money to have one of these in your map case.
Hey, just explain to everybody what you mean when you say handrail, because well, again, we could do a whole block of instruction on land navigation, but explain to everybody so they understand what you mean when you say handrail.
Well, basically, when you're military orienteering, when you're basically not moving cross country, but you're trying to get to, let's just say, you got a family member in another state, cross state, whatever it may be, cross town. If you're trying to get somewhere and you're like, I could wear myself out actually going cross country, or what I can do is I can stay along the known routes that I already know where I'm going, but stay far enough off the road that you're undetected. That's basically what handrailing is. Stay in the woods, keep the road in sight, and you can travel the same length of that road to the intersection that and take a right, and you're traveling along the roads. So handrailing any kind of road is a way to not get lost out in the woods. You can kind of keep an identifiable route in sight.
And then just to throw this in there. So again, and when I did move, and then Patrick already brought up one thing, I didn't really go into too much detail because realistically, in my opinion, land navigation needs to be its own separate thing. Clint has already kind of taken us down into this realm, and Patrick's already alluded to like en route rally points. And then you could be talking about caches. If you were really concerned about this and you knew that, hey, within the first 72 hours, I've got to bail out and go from here. This is where I am, but where I want to go is to link up with Clint or Patrick. They're at this distance, or they're in these locations, and here's the topography, the terrain, and to include all the natural hazards that go with it. Maybe swamps with snakes and alligators versus grizzly bears or X, Y, and Z. So you're gonna consider that. And then, so to Clint's point, you can travel very fast. And if you just think of any road most of the roads you've seen. And there's different types of roads, and without getting into, there's, back in the day in the military, you used to call it a go road. There's different terminology for it now, but a go road was like, it's a blacktop road. You're not going to have any problems. Then a slow go was maybe a dirt road, that wasn't, always maintained or X, Y, and Z. And then you had like a no go. I mean, this is kind of how you looked at terrain, but you can apply it to roads. And then you might have a road where it's like you need to have an off-road vehicle to even, to accomplish that, right? You're going to have an ATV or a 4x4 type of vehicle. Most vehicles, like, your Winnebago that you're bugging out, it's never going to handle that road. So if you look at those roads, and if you're on foot, as Clint is alluding to, and if time is of essence here, right? Because, getting into another little stupid thing, military acronym, but time is something that's always going to be important to you. Well, if you don't have a lot of time, hand railing that road is going to allow you to travel relatively quickly. Maybe you've thought it through ahead of time and you've got caches, so you can travel even lighter because you only are worried about food for, 24 hours because you got a cache at this location. But then to, Patrick's point, and maybe you get to that known location where, interstate this meets, county road that, and you've hand railed to that point. And now at that point, you're like, and I know if I continue doing this, like, it would be, I have to continue going north, catch this other road, and then I go west, and that's going to take me to Clint's house. But at this point right here, if I just shot a 210-degree azimuth, I only got 3 miles through the woods, and it's not swamp and it's not full of snakes. And then I can be coming up on the backside of Clint's, compound. So there's all kinds of different ways to look at this. But I think I really like where you guys just went immediately, because moving is, again, probably everybody just thinks this shit's easy. I'm just going to throw 80 pounds on my back and take me and my wife and 2 kids, or my elderly parents or whatever it is. And we're just going to set off and do this. Yeah, good luck with that, John Wayne. That's just not realistic, especially if you're moving through swamps or desert or, very, inhospitable terrain. Boys, where do you want to add on that right there? I mean, we're not done talking about the moving, but what more do you want to add to that?
Got a quick one, and I'll throw it right to Patrick on this. I literally have an RP point set up with my daughter for school. If something happens at the school, she knows where to go. If I can't, she knows where to go, where I'll be looking for her.
And RP, everybody, if you didn't figure that one out, that's a rally point. He's already got a rally point set up.
I've literally designated a spot for my daughter to go to. If something happens in the school and she can get out, she goes immediately there, and I know where to go look for her where she's away from the school. And
as you start your planning, you need to take that, and somebody like, well, that seems. No, I would even go further. And is that a strong point? Is that going to be just, can we defend that? Is that a place where we're going to lay up, or rest and refit? Or are we going to maybe have to Alamo there? Or from there, are we moving to someplace else? So do I maybe necessarily have to cache medical or food or ammunition, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
Patrick?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's fantastic. It's a great way to practice too. My son just recently joined the military. He's in special operations. Suburban kid, not a lot of time out in the woods, so I gave him a real in-depth class on land nav and talked about the importance of caches and having survivability equipment pre-position. Went out, bought a couple of Nalgene bottles, took it out there, put some fire making equipment in there and some fishing gear, and showed him how to nav. He got there. Wasn't quite sure, just like anybody else for the first time, is this really it? And hey, start looking for the little indicator of orange cord that I have barely sticking up. Yep, sure as shit, he got it. So, and these are confidence builders, and anybody can do this stuff. It doesn't take a lot of land nav. It's just, hey, just go out, just get in rural terrain, find a place that there's not a lot of foot traffic, and just bury something there and see if you can get back to it. You can go ahead and mark it if you want that warm and fuzzy, and you can use GPS now, but just realize, hey, if that stuff goes down, you need to by sight know where that is and make it accessible.
Hey, just that comment had come up, hey, put a link to the maps in the description. So Paul, hey, I just, while Patrick was talking, I mean, I just went and just Googled Rand McNally, and, there's a million different places where you can find these. So, I mean, I'm just like, I'm going through it all right now, just so over on Rand McNally. So that's just, is that Rand Publishing? Let me just go back to I think I did. Yeah, Well, or there's the store.randmcnally.com or Rand Publishing, again. And then just even on that note, expand, we're not going to put the link up for this because you can expand this into a direction you want to go. So over my shoulder, and these are larger map books, but this is the map book for like all of the lakes in the, and I've got for the northeast of Minnesota and then kind of the north central, we're kind of moored by Duluth, but all of those map books have all the lakes. There's all, there's maps in there with the roads, and that's where you get into a lot of the trails. Like, so, if you just go to your nationwide atlas, you're going to see the main roads, and you can break that down to states, but get into some of the state atlases as well. And that's where you're going to see all those biking trails and hiking trails that aren't going to be published on that larger publication. But on my last comment right there, and I don't know if you guys want to jump back to this, but boys and girls, you have to read maps. You have to learn how to navigate, whether it's with topo maps, military style maps, civilian style maps, the moon and the stars, the terrain. Again, we could spend a whole day just talking about how to navigate using nature. I mean, just think of where you live in the world and do your own research on this. It's not rules of thumb, but but moss on trees. Look at how trees, even the branches on trees. Now, sometimes this will throw you off a little bit, but trees are going to try to find sunlight. So, and then you can see this stuff. Once you go and look at it, you're like, holy shit, the vast majority of these trees really are more full or reaching out on the south side, because that's so that's pointing south. Look at animals, ants, ant hills, and termites. They build their mounds in a certain way, and that's all based on, where, the majority of the sunlight is. So there's all kinds of different, and again, just even using celestial navigation, but redundancy. We didn't talk about this on the movement side because we're, again, not necessarily a class on land navigation, but button compasses, military compasses, Sunto, watch compasses, learning how to use your watch. And you don't even have to have a watch. If you understand the concept of how to find direction because if you knew what time of the day it was, well, okay, well, here's where my big hand would be and my little hand would be, you can visualize that in your head and then in your mind, do a diagram. And now you're going to say, okay, and then now north is over here, the shadow tip method. So movement, my thing there on the movement, and I'll bring this back over to Patrick, because this is the thing I wanted to really get on, is it just saddens me to see so many people who are reliant upon, their phone, their GPS, the Google map, the backup, the backup camera on their car. Man, we're losing the hard skills. We're losing the skills that really matter, in my humble opinion.
Yep. I'll throw something else in there about the, now we're talking about mobility as far as like vehicles and stuff like that. If you've never driven on some of these rural roads that might have been flooded out, or hey, there might just be trails and that type of thing. If you're traveling with like 2 or 3 people, it's kind of incumbent upon you to make sure that you've got a tow strap, like a jack, so that you can kind of self-rescue. Because if you get out there and, it's an emergency, first off, there's not going to be probably anybody available to come help you anyway. So you've got to be able to self-rescue. So being able to, number one, learn how to drive in rural terrain, different steering techniques, learn the capabilities of the vehicle, but then also, being able to pull somebody out of, something muddy or whatever. These are key things. And that could be, just good information for wintertime stuff too. But all these capabilities, if you're a city dweller, it's kind of exciting because it's a whole new, realm of things to explore and become good at.
Bringing this over to Clint, but, just on that note. So again, the PCIs, the pre-combat inspection. So what should be in your vehicle? Are you just going to be driving your little Honda Fit down the blacktop? Okay, well, then there's a higher probability you're going to encounter some type of, maybe man-made or maybe the road's been washed out, again, depending on what the situation is. But to Patrick's point, tow shackles, pintles, block and tackle, rope, chain, knowing how to use that stuff. And again, kind of just throwing this in there, what Clint said. Yeah. So some of us, maybe we're lucky we grew up as kids and you just were out there 4-wheel driving and you had to do self-rescue, vehicle recovery, on your own multiple times, or you were, lucky enough to go out and get training, to do this. So thanks to the men and women who provided us with the opportunities to be grown-up kids and get a lot of the stuff. But none of this is simple. And I think this is my ultimate point for everything we're talking about here is, well, I'm just going to get my car and go. Do you have a spare tire? Do you know how to change a spare tire? Do you have extra oil? Do you even know what your vehicle, just to Patrick's point, does your vehicle burn a quart of oil every 100 miles and you've got 500 miles to go? Well, do the math. How many quarts of oil do you need to have in your vehicle? Now that's cube and now that's weight. Do you know how to do it? Spark plugs, so on and so forth. And then just even the simple thing is, what is the range of my vehicle on a full tank? And are you going to be driving 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour? Or are you going to be crawling on some of the back roads, and then what happens when you run out of, et cetera, et cetera. Yep.
Yeah, funny, when I was a teenager, I, would commandeer my dad's truck when my parents were out, and I'd go have a little fun in the snow up in Wyoming and get the truck stuck. And it's like, I either get this truck unstuck or I'm going to get beaten to an inch of my life. So actually got some training that way. And that, took me into mobility, being on a mobility team in the special forces. And, my team sergeant at one time come in and said, hey, we're going to spend 2 weeks up in the motor pool and we're going to learn how to weld. And I'm like, weld? Yeah, because we need to be able to, on our desert mobility vehicles, we need to be able to weld a swing arm. We need to be able to weld a drive shaft. We need to be able to, weld a shock absorber, because them things are like dirt bikes. But when you got 15,000 pounds on a GMV driving 75 miles an hour across the desert in the dark under night vision goggles, and you hit a nice big hole, you can really damage one of those vehicles, and there's nobody around to recover you.
Yeah.
So
not to imagine the damage that you're also doing to yourself as you hit that pothole under nods and all that crap on you.
So multiple times we had to do self-recovery. We had dirt bikes, 4-wheelers, GMVs. and they'd literally take us out and go get it stuck and get it out, and make us go do that. So the first time that you do it, you're not learning,
Yep.
And that's a great point. I heard this originally somewhere way back in the day, but I'm glad you just said it. You don't, the worst time to prepare for a crisis is while you're in the middle of it. So kind of what Clint just said, to echo it, another way of saying it, you don't want the first time you're doing this thing to be under duress and in a crisis. If it's, look, and maybe you can't plan for everything, going back to that, but maybe but at least you have done something similar. Okay, this is sand. It's not like snow, but it's kind of like snow, and I'm in there, so I'm going to know I'm going to need to put some type of, either a platform or wood or something to get it underneath those tires so my tires can have some traction. Maybe I need to let a little bit of, deflate my tires a little bit. So you got to get out there and have some of that knowledge. Watch some videos, talk to your buddies who grew up four-wheel, and see. So there you go, right there. That little smart-ass comment. All you city folk who make fun about people who live in the country, guess who aren't going to have these problems we're talking about? Country folk. That's who. What else you guys want to add on the move? Because we've got, communicate and medicate here, and we're at an hour 20, but doing it to standards, not the time. But I think not that I want to move too fast through the communications part, because that's a whole nother just separate class. But I really think the medicate, because selfishly for me, that's another big. If you've only got limited time and limited resources, medical has got to be high on your priorities. But what do you guys want to add on the move thing before we go forward?
Last thing I'll add on move, I think, is if you guys want to actually get some practice at this type of stuff, a very valuable hobby to have is overlanding. Getting a four-wheel drive vehicle, just go out and learn how to camp off the vehicle and operate from there. And, that goes along kind of with everything we've covered here. We're just not throwing the tactical side in, but guess what? When the shit hits the fan, you've done it and you know what it feels like.
That's exactly. A damn good point right there.
Very good point. And you see it all the time. You see these guys that got these gorgeous trucks that have all of the real trucks, accessories on them. They got the little twist on gas tanks and they got the tents on the top, and, but how much do you take that off road and actually really, see what you can do? And I'm talking about climbing, ascending, descending, articulating rocks, really getting out there where you got somewhere where you not sure if you can do it. And we were put in that scenario many, many times to try to get to a place and see if you can get back in there and get out without getting stuck. Story, and I'll toss this one to Patrick, but we had this gentleman that I worked on a training academy, and the guy, I swear he got every piece of equipment on the whole facility stuck multiple times, and he'd come back and I got the bulldozer stuck, I got the dump truck stuck. And I'm like, dude, you should feel bad when you come back and say that, because it's not a badge of honor that you got everything stuck on the facility. You should not get stuff stuck. And if you do, you look at a hole and go, this vehicle can't make it through that. Don't drive in there.
Yeah, just check your ego, be smart, know your limitations of yourself and your equipment, and to that point, there's a lot of people like, well, I've driven my whole life, I know how to drive this.
Well, yeah. Hey, Mark,
you've been driving on blacktop roads in cities, it's not the same thing.
It's a different animal. And to Clint's story about that guy, I mean, like, why is he trying to get a badge of honor of getting everything stuck? Because he knows somebody's going to be able to come and get him.
Yeah.
In these scenarios, nobody's coming. So if you get stuck, you're screwed, and means you're walking.
You just went from mobility with a vehicle to mobility carrying on your back, because now you just lost an asset because you weren't smart enough to have been in that situation before and said, that's too much for my capability. I need to back off and find another way around it, because we can't do that.
Yeah. And your teammates might kick your ass as a result too.
Yeah. Now we're all on foot.
Yeah. And no one wants to do now it's a team drill and everybody's got to carry 5 gallons of water, on top of all your other shit. So yeah, that's a bunch of crap. Hey, just last comment right there as we get ready to move into the communicate part. But so, we were kind of a little vehicle centric here in our conversation, but that's important because I think, because that pertains to your day-to-day life right now. You could get stuck, depends where you live. These events can happen all the time. But if if it's a coronal mass ejection or an EMP, and if in a motorized, and again, that's electric, same thing. If you're like, well, but I got an electric car. Okay, well, how many electric charges will it be? So whether it's combustion engine or electric, look and consider what your other options would be, kind of going down that level. The last thing I want to be doing is where Patrick and Clint just kind of left it, is everything's on my back. And now I've got to walk, 300 miles, a bicycle with a pull behind. There's all kinds of little pull behind trailers. You could have a bicycle and mount your rucksacks. That's what, that little picture you saw, that was a mule with a bunch of rucks, but you can do that with a bicycle too. There's, have a little push standoff bar where you can, you're not right on there. A wheelbarrow. There's all kinds of little wheelbarrow things out there that you could be. So hell, even a shopping cart is, now that's going to be limited. You're probably not going to be pushing that down a trail, but you get the point. There are other options to include, do you have mules? Do you have horses? Is that something that you can harness? Heck, if you got a dog with you, maybe, the dog's carrying its own food. I mean, if you can do that. So just think about that stuff. Any last thing? Yeah. Okay. Clint. Yep. Go ahead.
A good point. And you said, check your ego. Sometimes you really need to know what your capabilities are, because when you become a liability, you diminish your mobility. You've become now injured because you did something that you probably should have said, no, I don't want to become a liability to the team because my ego, and now they're dragging you on a couple of poles, through the woods, because now they got to carry you because they don't want to leave you because you've gotten injured, and I mean, that's recovering a vehicle. You start winching and, the winch comes undone and takes your legs off. I mean, there's a lot of danger to a lot of this stuff. Yep. Getting stuff stuck, getting it recovered, and doing it safely, and knowing how to use the equipment. Everything from a pick, an axe, a winch, straps. There's so much stuff that you can get injured with if you don't, you're not tacking things right. Same thing, tacking horses, getting them set up right and having them tacked out with equipment. You got to set it up right. You got to train. You got to know how to do it, and do it before you need to do it, not learn while you're doing it.
Patrick, anything to add? And then
I think we should move on. I think we hammered that one pretty good. I mean, we could go on and on. This whole thing could be on moves and mobility.
Yeah. And that is the problem with all this. Again, this was just more of an introductory level kind of class, just to get people to start thinking about stuff. Every one of these subjects is a class in and of itself. I mean, it just is. All right, going on to the communication. So here's what we're going to look like. Just showing everybody the slides. Again, commo is huge. We'll just spend the time. I mean, maybe just trying to hit what everybody thinks are the highlights. The little slide I threw in there, not because look at me, it's to look at what's going on. We've already said PACE before, primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. You can apply that to a lot of things. That's also a term in commo, but I'm on a certain type of phone. That's a satellite communication little thing there. That's going to one of my 3 radios. So there's a lot going on in communication, or there can be a lot in communication, or you try to apply the KISS rule to keep it simple, stupid, because you don't have that technology. You don't have that, you're not good at or you're afraid of the math behind radio, line of sight, FM, AM, VHF, UHF, all that. So anyway, so here's just a lot of the things to kind of think about why you might want to communicate, and some of the ways in which you can, but some of the considerations, electric, environmental, and, all this kind of stuff. And then I'm just going to bring it to the guys here. For me, the whole thing's always been just like everything else we're talking about. Is it easy for me and other people to operate, and how much energy requirements are there for it? Is it a hand crank thing? So I just got a hand crank and I can always, and then Clint and I have worked out a thing that we're only coming up on the air at twice a day at certain times, right? And then, so maybe I just have that hand crank and I don't have to worry about batteries because I'm not using this. It's not an open channel communication thing that I need. I'm only doing it twice a day as I'm trying to make movement to Clint's house to let him know about my progress. Is that what I'm looking at? Am I concerned about other people being able to eavesdrop on my communications? Do I want to have secure communications? To what level of secure? I'll just say it right now, and I'm not giving anything away. Boys and girls, if you think any of this shit's secure, you're just fooling yourself, right? So who wants to jump in on the commo side here? And again, My biggest thing is reliability, ease of functionality, because a lot of commo scares a lot of people. So keep it simple, stupid, and then look at your power requirements. That's kind of some of my big ones. Anybody go in your own direction?
Yeah, go ahead, Clint.
I'll tell you what, I've of all the skills that I have, commo is one of my Achilles heels. I've never been real good at it. We've cross-trained on radios and stuff, but when it comes right down to my family unit and or my network of trusted people in my area, basically what I'm going to default to is, some kind of walkie-talkie, some Motorola's or something like that, something super simple, easy to power, easy to carry, and they're accessible. You can get them Dick's Sporting Goods, Shields. You can go over to Walmart. You can get us, but when you go to those open channel radios, you actually have to come up with a system of how you're going to use the program channels in there and how you're going to talk to each other in a way that the other person that can easily monitor those aren't going to know. They're not going to know what you're talking about. Phase lines and, rally points and things that have meanings only to your network. So when you come up and say something, hey, I'm going to link up with you in this area, whatever that word is, that it's only known within your network. So, and you only use that stuff. You just can't say anything on those open net radios. And that's what I use. When you don't have tons of money to have high speed, or you don't have a ham radio license. And I know some guys out there that is their bread and butter, man, is communications. I personally, for me, I know I'm not going to need to be talking to anybody in Mexico. I don't really need to be talking to anybody in Europe. So my commo plan is fairly simple. And like I said, knowing natural disaster or some kind of shit hits the fan scenario like that, having some kind of a rally point where everybody knows to go to. We're not around each other right now. Where do we find each other? Primarily, once you get to that spot and you have some radios and you hand them out and say, all right, I'm gonna go out and forage. I'm gonna give you a pace plan. I'm getting ready to leave. Here's your radio. This is what I'm gonna say when I'm coming back, so it's me. And those are the kind of things you got to communication plan is something you got to kind of put some thought and put it together and have accessibility to that communication system. Go ahead, Pat.
Just before you do, Patrick, just let me throw in there. If your communication plan is going to be relying upon, Motorola push to talks, and again, open source type of communications, and there's all kinds of different radios, do your own research, again, do you want a radio that can reach out and it's got really good, hey, this is good for, 50 miles. I'm just making that up. Well, and then on some of this, though, you're going to have to look at your radio wave propagation, your antennas. And again, commo can be a scary thing for a lot of people. Maybe you want to start looking into ham radios. But before I come over to Patrick, bringing it back to Clint, if you're going to be using it open source, and if your scenario is in one in which that you are concerned about hostile forces, whether that's the government, whether that's people who might want to steal your shit, you do need, and this is where, again, you have to plan, you have to think this stuff through, know the people in your group, and you have to plan and work these issues out ahead of time. You could just make up your own words. I mean, so the military, you've already heard us using some military jargon, phase lines, there's all kinds of way. Hey, we're at Budweiser, and then I'm at Miller, and those that doesn't mean anything to anybody. Now, if it's a host nation, they might be triangulating and based on your strength and where they think, the strength of your radio signal, they might be able to start putting together your route. But again, is that really what you're concerned about? If you're just concerned about the random person who might pick up what you're saying on your Motorola push to talk, hey, we're hitting objective, we're at phase line Miller, we're at objective, Budweiser, whatever, come up with that kind of stuff. And this could be a completely different class. I just grabbed a book. There's such an easy way to do that with any book, right? That if I have the book and Clint has it, the same edition, and Patrick does, there is a way to do this, and you can actually be talking to each other, and it's virtually impossible to break. But there it is. And then, so for you guys who were old school in the military, just think about, your authentications and how you used to have to authenticate, blah, blah, blah. I didn't want to sidetrack us too much, but I just think it's super important. If you're going to rely on verbal communications via radio, open source, there are other ways in which, if you are concerned about it, and maybe we'll do that as another little thing in the future and show people how to do that. Patrick?
Yep. Commo's kind of above my head. I wasn't an 18 Echo or a SIGINT guy or anything like that, but I've been around it long enough. One of the things you guys have hit on, is referred to as ComSec, communication security. And I think that that's something that anybody here can do, right? So you're thinking about if cell towers go down, like the radios, that's a key thing, just making sure that you have the ability to reach out and talk to the people that you need to, probably within like a fairly close distance, right, in your community. We use call signs, right? We use call signs for a reason, so that you're not clearly identifying yourself. We use certain letter combination codes for certain locations. The idea of using a book that everybody's got access to and everybody knows, hey, this is what we're doing. Okay, check. If you're just saying, throwing a random group of numbers and it says, hey, I'm moving here to this location, and it spells it out. Okay, great. Then we all know, and somebody that would be listening in on that would not have any idea. So ComSec's huge. Talking about PACE plan. So primary, I think most people are probably going to, in an emergency, they're going to text or call. If the cell towers go down, and I told a story last time about a miscommunication that there was an active shooter at a mall instead of a real shooting at a mall. The cell towers, got, so overwhelmed that nobody could get through. And next thing you know, we had 5 SWAT teams showing up, clearing the mall. While at the same time, about an hour later, there was the police chief or the deputy chief saying, hey, we've already got the person in custody, all is clear. Somebody made the decision to let parents go back in the mall while the teams were clearing, and it just was a catastrophe. So having, when that cell tower goes down and you can't reach out, what's your next plan, right? You got phone, you might have text if there's enough bandwidth of the tower. The next thing would be something along the lines of, if you have a tertiary, means like a walkie-talkie or something like that, or it could just be, hey, look, I'm going to be in this general location, which maybe that's like, you're thinking like 9-line without getting too detailed. That's the first thing you give is a location. Hey, last time I heard from Mark or Clint, they were at this location. So you know what? We've got no comms. I'm physically going to go there and try to link up with them. And then I'm looking for ways to identify them. So communication also gets down to, like, before we, link up, like, hey, what are you guys wearing? Where are you going to be? And how do I identify you? So I need near and far recognition signals. So it could be like, some bright color. Hey, Mark's wearing pink silkies. Okay, cool. I see them. Clint's cross-dressing. Hey, wait a minute. That's a dude, okay, cool. Those are my near recognition symbols, but so on and so forth. But it goes from technical communication all the way down to hand and arm signals and visual sight. So but the ComSec piece is huge.
So and I hope everybody's picking up what we're kind of just putting down. Again, we're not even gonna try to do justice to it, because the justice to talking commo is a whole nother day. It's a whole nother course by itself. Verbal communications, nonverbal communications, arm and hand signals. So, we're sitting here talking about radios. Well, like what Patrick and Clint were just kind of already alluding to, and Clint's already done to some extent with his daughter, right? So, if in the military, there's passwords and running passwords. A running password is like, I'm being chased by a bear or the bad guy, so I'm coming in, I'm saying a certain word only you and I know, and that's identifying to you that it is me approaching you, making that noise coming through the woods, and there's a danger behind me. So it's already bringing you up. So I already just communicated for my safety and your safety, but you've now just matched that, and you now know to be more alert or more ready or more prepared for whatever comes next. this communication is so detailed to include, like, if you are serious and if part of your self-reliance is making sure that your buddy could come to you. So again, where are you and where do you want to go and how are you going to get there and what are the obstacles that are going to try to prevent you from doing that? Well, you're going to have worked about other stuff out. And as Patrick just said, some of that is also a no comms plan. Hey, I know Mark's got a radio. This is, or here, I'll just do it this way. I know Clint's got a radio. We're doing the push to talk. And we've tested this before and we know it's, this, we can talk to each other, from, line of sight at 100 miles distance. I'm just making that up, but you'd have to figure that out because maybe the comma won't work until we get within 30 miles of each other. All right. So then there's a no comma plan. Hey, this event happened and 24 hours later, if the power didn't come on, I know Clint and his are going to be bugging out and they're coming to me. So, and then they should be able to cover this much distance in the first 24 hours, and then another 24 hours after that. So now we're 72 hours past that event and Clint should be 30 miles away from me. Clint should be starting to slow his roll coming up to me because he doesn't know if he's entering into a secured location or if I've been overrun by, snakes, grizzly bears, raiders, whatever it is. So he's doing his far recognition. We're trying to do our far recognition. Then we're doing near recognition. Some of that might rely upon other forms of communication, such as flares, signal mirrors, smoke fires, whistles. Think about all those environmental considerations and the pros and cons of each one of those things, though, as well, right? Because if Clint can see my signal flare, guess who else can see it as well? And so there's always a pro and a con for all this stuff, and you just got to really take a step back and really consider it. But if you are worried about your communications being done in such a way that it is private, there are numerous ways to do that. Not want to just kind of go over everything Patrick and said, but code words, brevity codes, different ways to encode it. And then, but the big one, and I'm going to bring it back to Clint because he's the one who kind of started on it, is you have to have that plan and you have to have thought it through, discussed it with your other people in your party, and you need to be rehearsing it. Because how many people have even gone out and used, I did, so here, I'll plug for Centerline. They're still out there. This was like 4 years ago and using a drone. And I just did a whole thing I did 3 videos on visual signaling. And I showed you what this type, like what an orange marker looks like, what a blue marker looks like. We had the drone up, can you hear the whistle? Can you see this type of flare, signal mirrors, the whole 9 yards? That's our thing. Everybody's got that stuff, but how often have you ever practiced with it? How many people can actually effectively take a signal mirror and actually then put it to use? So, and Clint's grabbing more goodies. So I think that's perfect to bring it back over to him.
Well, I mean, it's funny that even, signal stuff, just, IR caps, if you've got night vision goggles, so you can actually employ a night vision flash with night vision, or it's directional, so you can only see it in one direction. Very easy to put, just AA batteries in here. These are great. Signal mirrors. I keep most of this stuff in close by bug out bags. I'll tell you another one that's become very important. I mean, these things are great, but if this is your clock, you probably need to be carrying one of these.
Yep.
Well, because this thing should almost be in a Faraday bag all the time anymore, because if you want to disconnect at all, and it's like we were talking about, if you have a plan and you're going to be gone, I'm going to be gone an hour. Okay. Within that hour, I'm shutting this radio off. So I'm not sending out a signal and I'm not being tracked. Within that hour, I'm going to come back up on the net. And this is when I come on the net, I'm going to be on channel 1. Okay. And then I'm going to go back off that net again. It's going to be shut off. And then 2 hours, I'm going to come back up on that net and I'm going to be on channel 4. And have this stuff worked out where it's kind of non-sequential, but you thought this thing out, because I'll tell you what, these phones, oh my gosh, what a liability. And they should pretty much be in a Faraday bag all the time, even if you're going to keep it with you when the shit hits the fan scenario. Yep. Shit hits fan scenario. That thing goes in a Faraday bag, so you're not getting tracked. And if you're using just a regular, I keep just basic comms for my family, just a little earpiece, little mic, and a little radio, that if I hand this to a family member and say, in an hour, come up on this on channel 1, I'll be trying to contact you. Very simple, inexpensive. You know, you got a 10, 15 mile radio. You know, I've been in the woods before with large forces, and a partisan link up, my God, takes forever to actually connect with another unit and make sure you don't have fratricide.
Yes.
No, it's a very, I mean, you're sitting, waiting. What's taking so long? They're trying to make comms. It's a commo is something you have to think about because you're going to want it.
Well, and that kind of goes into maybe my last comment on it, because this right here, we're human beings. You know, I hear a lot of people, and some people are okay with, you know, just the isolation and being by themselves, but a lot of people aren't very good with it. And just having that ability to be able to hear another human voice, or to, you know, Clint's point, a Faraday badge, maybe you're throwing like a small laptop that's got a bunch of movies on it, or, you know, it's your phone, and maybe the cell service will come back up at some point, right? You know, but that ability to be able to actually talk to another human being. Here's a horrible example, but it's a good zombie movie. I think it's set in Milwaukee. It actually just starts off crazy as hell. You don't even know the zombie apocalypse, but at some point there's a handful of survivors. They're in a mall, and there's a guy on the other side of the street and a gun store. And one of them says he might as well be on the moon, because they can't, you know. So, but then once they find a way to get that radio to that guy, you can just hear it. Everybody was just like, he's like, oh, I finally can talk. And just having that ability to talk to another human being in that type of, if it's an isolated, self-reliant, you know, or survival situation, yeah, that could prove to be incredibly important just for your morale. And that's maybe the thing that helps keep you in the fight for another day.
You may be the one that has to go out and go forage. You may be the one asset that has to go away from the group. And if you have to go away from the group, you know, you want to be able to get back to them without drawing attention to where, you know, your less capable group members are. You don't want to bring everybody to them.
Yeah. Well, and to your side, I mean, that's just, and so again, everybody wants to poo-poo the military and things all the time. But, you know, that real world experience that's even sometimes just passed down just in training, it's one of the most dangerous operations, a re-entry of friendly lines or a link up with another unit out in the woods, whether it's a partisan or, you know, it's everybody's nervous trigger, you know, you might be in a hostile environment. So that makes everybody even more nervous. So your ability to accurately and clearly communicate so everybody's on the same sheet of music is vital. Yeah. You know, and I actually, my kind of final comment, maybe that's the reason why they don't want everybody to communicate right now. I mean, you just think about it, why there's so much censorship, or, you know, ScrewTube and Google and Instagram and everybody. Maybe that's part of it right there too, because that breaks down the human condition, and, you know, and it puts a barrier between, you know, us as human beings and actually being able to talk to other people and share ideas and learn from each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick, anything you want to add to that? Kind of just, again, I threw this up here, you know, everybody should be able to see it. There's so much to commo, you know, again, you can go back and look at it, you know, those environmental considerations I was kind of throwing out before, like verbal kind of communications. Think again, whistles, you know, well, even whistles, ground flares, signal mirrors, you know, smoke signaling, that kind of stuff. Your environment is going to play a huge role in that too. So, you know, if you don't have any wet wood, well, then you're going to make a signal fire and it's just going to burn clear with no smoke. So consider all those environmental considerations. Patrick, you want to add something there?
Yeah, just a couple things and a quick little war story. But yeah, so if you're, you think about like the train you live in, right? If you're traveling along, if you're taking a road trip or wherever in mountainous terrain, hey, that signal drops out. Sometimes it drops out when like you're in an urban environment in a big city or something like that, because it's hard, you know, it's not reaching the cell tower. It's being blocked by these large, you know, stone buildings or mountains, depending on, you know, where you are, right? So understanding that the high ground is usually going to be your better chance at getting signal. That's always just a basic concept. Back to the communication security, or what we call ComSec. If you are going to use a Faraday bag for anything, before you put your device in there, especially if battery, you know, is a concern, which it probably is, make sure you turn the thing either off or at least put it on airplane mode, because that phone is going to keep searching for a signal all the time, and it's going to burn itself out. So then when you get to where you're going and you pull it out, you're ready to use it. Well, now you can't establish comms because it's dead. So kind of
turn it off. Just turn it off and remove the battery.
Yeah,
just a good rule of thumb. Yep.
That's really the best course of action for that. Lastly, as far as go ahead, Clint.
Let me say one thing, and Mark just mentioned it. They make it to where you can't take the battery out anymore. Your phones, your laptops, things like that, you can't remove the battery. So you need to turn it off to save battery, like Patrick said. Save the battery, throw it. But that thing's running all the time, so they can track you. So throw it in the Faraday bag, at least turn the power off, and you're good. At least when you pull it out and turn it back on, you got a little juice left.
And, and there's a great comment right there. And I'll just say this, because again, this was part of my background is, again, clandestine, covert, however you want to say it, there's a difference there, but of different types of communications. And, and per your group, you might want to go out and find some burner phones and that actually do run on batteries, right? As opposed to this, that we're like, because I totally hadn't thought about it, but Clinton's absolutely right. You can't get into this stuff and get at this anymore, and hell, I don't even know that I just said that out loud. I don't even know if you can get old burner phones where you can replace the batteries anymore,
It's rare, but they're still out there. You just have to probably go to some of the seedier areas around where you live.
But and somebody might say, oh, that's a sign of indication of drug or illegal activity. No, it's not. It's an indication, and I don't want you guys monitoring me all the time, and I want to make sure that I've got good, secure comms in case there's ever a emergency. Just on that right there. So I mean, we kind of overlooked this, and I don't know if I had it in the slides. So we all just did it. We all just brought up this technology. Well, if again, where do you want to go? Where are you now, and where do you want to go? Well, if the bugging in or at your friend's house bugging out is maybe a landline. Landlines are going to probably be up and running a lot longer than these things are, right? So don't forget about just even a landline telephone in your house. How many people even have landlines anymore?
Yeah,
I don't even know. But cell phone GSM goes down, but landlines could still be up. So just another thing. So again, communication. None of this stuff is easy. There's a lot of thought that has to go in behind all of it. Any final comments, guys? And then we're going to go into the last realm, which is medicate. And boy, guys and girls, we're already at 1 hour and 50. And, I just feel like we're rushing through it. But, it's just so much information trying to get out here. Patrick and Clint, if you're okay, well, let's just do medication. And if it takes a little bit longer, it takes a little bit longer. You guys all right with that?
Yeah. Good. Yeah, that's fine.
Yep. Any final comments on the combo?
Yeah, I'll throw this in. So, when I was with GRS at the agency, one of the things that we would do normally overseas, this goes to Clint's point about, PCIs, pre-combat inspection, pre-combat checks, which also goes kind of like into rehearsals too, rehearsing what you're going to do. If we were going to be in an area where there was a military presence and, things went bad, we wanted to go where there's, U.S. or coalition forces to reach a point of safety. Well, guess who mans those gates with large weapons, the 50 caliber type? A bunch of lower enlisted folks, whether Army, Marine, or whoever, right? So one of the things that we would do, because this was a lesson learned. We had somebody that tried to roll in there in an emergency. They were in a bad way. They had a mobility kill. They had people in a vehicle. It got shot up pretty bad. A couple people got hurt. And forced retired. Luckily, they weren't killed. So that's where those lessons were learned. So we would always make a point to go and, hey, I want to see face to face who's going to be manning these gates over the next 72 hours that we might be in your area. You always say might, but it kind of lets them know, hey, you're going to be here. Here's what we look like. I want to see what you look like. And here's what we're going to show when we come rolling up. If you see a vehicle rolling up very fast, it's rolling up fast for a reason. Please don't light us up. We're going to have a far recognition signal of an American flag. And then as we get up close, we're going to have our windows down. Somebody's hand's going to be out, and we're going to be yelling something, very clearly American, something along the lines of, "You boys speak American? Y'all got any dip?" or something like that, to let them know, hey, okay, these guys are good. Let them in the gate and then secure everything afterwards, right? But that happened. So these are things going back to each one of these modes of communication. You need to practice and rehearse that stuff. And again, hey, this stuff can be enjoyable and it can be fun, but you're also kind of like, building the blueprint for if something goes bad, you've already done it. So do it in a less stressful, more fun way, but get it done.
And just go all the way back to our very first episode. And, again, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who are watching this or watch this later, you know, you've been in that background or you've had that type of experience too. You know, you were in the military. Maybe it's true that that's true what I just said, or maybe not, but that interoperability, that coordination at those levels. So just kind of going back to the first episode, we all talked about, like, you know, how did the events of on the 14th of July transpire? How did that guy get up there? Because we talked about commo. So go back and watch that, because Clint and I were talking about rules of engagement. And then I think we had I can't remember who it was. It may have been with George, but we even just did a scenario of like what that commo thing would have looked like between the different elements, because not all those elements were Secret Service, but like, hey, you, this is me, and that. And Patrick just gave a great example of what professionals do. So either the Secret Service is no longer professional, or they just very knowingly just didn't do I hate to call it routine, but that is a routine thing that you always do at those levels. So it's mind-boggling to me, you know, not to kind of take us down a rabbit hole talking about the attempted assassination and how there was no call out on the radio. I guess that's kind of where I was going, but
yep.
All right, Clint, want to add, or we're going to move to medical here?
Let's move on.
All right, moving on to medical. This is just a picture to show you how medicating and how being in a self-reliant situation isn't as pretty as you think it is. I mean, you know, I've never been a sexy guy anyway, but you can see how emaciated I am, right? And that's because I was living off of the terrain for an extended period of time. Yeah, there were some, you know, MREs and stuff like that, but a lot of this was we were self-providing, right? We were providing for ourselves and just kind of the thing. So, and then you look at the physical fitness, the physical conditioning, you know, like I was burning obviously way more calories than I was taking in. And all I'm trying to do is that the body of somebody who's going to be able to handle a small cut or a tooth infection, or, you know, let alone being shot. But you can see, and so in a self-reliance type of scenario or survival scenario, just your diet is going to affect your medical conditions, right? And then so medicate, just, you know, again, I'll show you the slides and then we'll come back. This is huge. All right. So medicate. Let me just get rid of that and bring it on there. I'm going to come to you, Clint, first, because, you know, that's everything. You know, one of the things that I always liked and appreciated about the, you know, the SF community is, you know, more people over there that I saw in my personal experience understood the importance of medical, whereas in the regular infantry unit, it was like, here's your field dressing, and, you know, and then they just no one really cared. So they said, just throw tourniquets on everything, as opposed to actually teaching people actual field medicine. Mm-hmm. Where do you want to go? I mean, I'm going to turn it over to you first.
Wow. Boy, that's another big subject, like mobility, medical stuff. So the first 8 years that I was in the Army, I was a combat medic. So within my duties were not only, you know, day-to-day cuts and owies and things like that, but it was also making sure that that stuff around the forward operation base, camp area, whatever, was sanitary, you know. So, I mean, everything from latrines were sanitary, that the chow hall was following, you know, sanitary protocols, so you're not getting people sick. Lots of stuff like that. And that was part of the duty, was making sure runoff from the chow hall was, you know, flies, rodents, all that kind of stuff started playing into stuff that you actually had to go make, you know, recommendations to the commander, first sergeant, or the senior at the medical, you know, hey, I was over there and the trash is piling up and there's a whole lot of flies, and I think I saw some mice or rats or something over there. Those are things you need to consider. You get sick. And again, you become not an asset, you become a liability. So, you know, you have to, you know, keep your hands clean, keep your hands out of your mouth. You take your medication. If you got a cut, take care of it. Get healthy as quick as you can. You talked about, I mean, just eating, making sure you're eating properly, you're drinking water, taking any medication. At this point, I'm 55 years old. You know, I've put some serious miles on this chassis. So, I mean, I got my owies, back's bad, rotator cuffs, bad ankles, all that kind of stuff. You know, I have to be cautious. I'm like a diesel engine at this point. I have to get up to operating temperature before I do anything quick, you know, or I'm going to tear it. You know, those fast twitch muscles start getting away from you and you're not fast like a 20-year-old. So you have to know capabilities, know your capabilities physically. And then stay up on that kind of stuff. I'll pitch it off to Patrick. I threw a bunch of stuff out there. Maybe he saw something I said he can jump on.
Before he comes over to Patrick, though, so just in case, so we don't forget to bring it back over to Clint, though. So again, on the medical side, some people are squeamish, some people are a little afraid of it. Hey, it's just, squeamish or not, it's something that you don't have to know how to do like open heart surgery or remove a gallbladder. Hopefully, you don't have to do that in whatever the scenario is prepared for. But there are some very basic things that you really do have to know how to take care of. But as Clint just really stressed, one of the big things about, hey, how about preventive maintenance so you don't have to go down that medical road? Patrick?
Yeah, amen to that. I'm in that same 55-year-old realm, and I've got all these all the high mileage injuries and stuff like that to go along with it. I will say that on working on the first responder thing as a law enforcement officer, I gained a very healthy respect for all the paramedics and all the people at the hospital. Amazing. And that was my first exposure to like, hey, saving somebody's life, whether it was heart attack, car accident, that type of thing. Moving on to, military, back in the day, we used to have, like long ago, I think they still call it this combat lifesaver. And that was basically taking care of, broken bones and, handling some puncture wounds and things like that. They used to require everybody to get a good IV on someone, which I thought was fantastic. They eventually took that away. Well, 9/11 kicked off. Ranger Battalion was probably at the head of this with creating the tactical combat casualty care, and a lot of people were dying from loss of blood. We call massive hemorrhaging. They put this together, did a bunch of studies, and started like really pushing it out to the force, and it gained a lot of traction pretty quick. And I was luckily able to go through a lot what we refer to as a live tissue lab. There you go. There you go. A live tissue lab twice when I was at the agency. And a lot of the folks that were the instructors that had to be conducted under an actual doctor, and they had to have an anesthesiologist for our patients, which were animals. And those patients would receive, if you're somebody that's a big PETA fan, stick with me because the animals actually, are used later on for stuff. So, but the patients receive, little bits of trauma. So you learn how to go through, hey, you guys check the vitals of your patient, make sure everything's good. Okay, go step aside. Next thing you know, he's yelling, medic, medic. All of our guys were either PJs or 18 Deltas. And so we'd run up, do our sweeps, and check for, whatever it is. Starts off with a knife wound. Well, this trauma slowly progressed into explosions and shotgun wounds and, eyeballs hanging out and that type of thing. And you had to get the patient, stabilized. And to me, that was the best training anybody could go through. I tried to bring that to the law enforcement side. The best we could get was the North American Rescue robot dummies that, it's close, but it's not the same thing as live tissue, but it was fantastic. And so we go through, and I'll run down this real quick, something called March. March algorithm is what they referred to it as, which was massive hemorrhaging. And Clint, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if this has changed since I went through, this is probably like almost 10 years ago. Massive hemorrhaging, airway, respiration, check to see, hey, they're still breathing, see circulation. Hey, are we getting capillary refill? Or are they still, is blood still pumping in their body? And then the H was either head wound, you're checking for head wound, which if you ask somebody if they're all right, maybe they're concussed from an explosion or something like that. Or if there's been blood loss and you had to tourniquet and pack the wound, they're going to start getting cold. So the H could also go to hypothermia. So you need to keep them warm until they could be moved to a higher level of care. But that stuff, there's now a civilian version of it. So when Ranger Battalion did the studies on it, they were basically drawing, from the experience of a population of mostly males that were between the ages of 18 to, 35, 40. Pretty good people, pretty good shape these folks were in, and a lot of them had body armor on. But when you bring that same thing to the, continental United States, You've got all age groups. You've got male, female. You got a whole range of pre-existing conditions you might have to deal with. So that's a little bit different. If you're in first responder world, listening to this, go get the certification for tactical emergency casualty care, and it's just empowering. To Mark's point, when we're talking about people being squeamish about other people's blood, the best piece of advice I was given, I think this guy was a PJ, is like, listen, you need to execute what you've been trained to do. Because it's their emergency, not yours. You have to. They're going through the emergency. If you lose your shit, you're dooming them. So you need to keep it together and execute what you know to do and save their life. And fantastic.
I'll tell you, jump in on one thing, and not everybody has the disposable income to go to a high-end medical class. I can't even stress enough. In your local area, I've worked with the Red Cross quite a bit in different camps, FEMA camps, disaster camps, things like that. Red Cross they all run great first aid courses.
Stop the bleed.
If not free, they're extremely inexpensive. Airway, bleeding, breathing, and circulation. I mean, those things you need to have every day. You need to know those. Doing the Heimlich, doing some kind of basic bandaging. I mean, that stuff, you can go to the Red Cross, and almost every town's got one close by. You can go in there and sign up and get into a first aid class. I just did it again. I did my rescue diver certification. So I just went through all my certifications for that stuff again. Being an asset for an emergency is those are skills you definitely need. And I mean, lots of people can shoot. And I always dote a lot on the guys that are out there teaching classes that are the communications classes, the medical classes, the land nav classes. It's these other skills. Lots of people could shoot, but what are the other assets that you bring to a team? And those are some big things. Red Cross is a great place to start because it's very inexpensive and you can do it often.
Yeah. Hey, Clint, they have a national program called Stop the Bleed. And I think pretty much anybody, if they just go online, can find something locally, usually, hosted by a fire department or maybe a hospital. It's maybe a one-day class. It's kind of like CPR. It's just a one-day version. And I think it's fantastic.
And just to add to that as a resource, if you, the individual watching, if you have the time, look into some of those volunteer organizations. Maybe you've got a volunteer fire rescue, volunteer search and rescue, because those organizations will be pushing a lot of that training for their members anyway, right? So if you're volunteer fire, volunteer EMS, or volunteer search and rescue, you are going to be going through training, like there's an obligation there. Like, hey, if there's a crisis, we want you to, you got to man up and come out here and help us find this person or deal with it. But to that, again, if you don't have the money yourself, there's other ways. And hell, you might even find whole new community members so all of this conversation makes a little bit more sense, because you're finding that guy's like, okay, I was able to do this and now I'm learning, so I'm not an idiot, but Joey's been doing this, or Tommy's like you said, he's a EMT and he's a former, 18 Delta. 18 Deltas, those are the Special Forces medics, So yeah, okay. So I'm going to rely on that guy, or whomever it is, or this is like somebody from our local ER, whether it's a nurse or a doctor. But find those opportunities and pursue them, because this training, we're just never going to do justice to how important this is. And you don't, again, and my point before I bring it to the guys is, you don't have to learn how to be a brain surgeon. Look at your environment. Look at the most common type of injuries and maladies. And don't forget, a lot of that is environmental: heat stroke, heat exhaustion, trench foot, frostbite, hypothermia. There's a lot of other ways that you'll be injured and potentially killed that aren't as sexy as fighting Sasquatch or taking on a wolf by yourself with a knife type of thing. Gentlemen.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I'll add 2 points to the medical piece. Number one, if you're a gun or knife aficionado or whatever warrior skill you've got to understand. Hey, guess what? If you've got an actual reason to use that, maybe somebody else is gonna hit you. Maybe they're gonna shoot you. Maybe they're gonna cut you. And let's say that you end up successful. You're still gonna have to keep the blood inside of you, right? You're still gonna have to keep breathing, or if they've hit somebody else, you need to be able to save their life. So, but that includes your own. That's a key piece right there. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, and I just think that gives you the confidence once you start learning how to do that. And I think, look, between me and like you guys, the people and the groups I've been in, the environments, I have more stitches on my body that I either gave myself or one of these guys gave me. Right. So, and with that comes the confidence, like I don't have to go to the emergency room, hey, I know how to like immobilize this. I've got quick clot. I understand. Okay. What sutures would be better here. So that is just going to increase your confidence. That's what, as you were saying that, Patrick, all I was just getting at. And with that confidence that confidence is huge, especially in the medical realm, because, and not to tell a war story, but I've seen people who have that background and that experience, but then maybe this was the very first real injury they saw and they're kind of, losing their shit,
Yeah. Amen. The other thing I'll add to this is, I've done a lot of work with different church security groups and things like that. And luckily I went through a training, and the guy's a retired Secret Service guy, one of the legit ones from back in the day. And he highly recommended, hey, if you're going to set up a church security program, you cannot do it effectively without some type of medical element. Well, I had a bunch of guys saying, hey, we want to learn how to shoot. We want to do this. We want to do that. Okay, fine. You should also, I always talk about physical fitness, so that kind of put a damper on the cool guy thing. And then when we put together the team and finally started like working it, the group that got the most, activity, hands down, the medical. We had people falling down and slipping. We had people with heart attacks. We had people with seizures all the time. So the security element became the guys that we're going to clear the path, let the paramedics or our own internal people, work on them, get them out to where they can be picked up by an ambulance and transported. That stuff happens all the time. But once you, get a decent level of comfortability with this type of stuff by seeking training, it's a superpower. I'm always looking for somebody choking. I'm always looking for somebody, having a heart attack. It's like, I'm almost hoping for it. It hasn't happened yet, but someday.
Just so you can swoop in there and do your
just
thing.
So I can try my skills out,
Yeah. Hey, just on that note though, but so again, that goes to the confidence. So I never worked as an EMT, but I put myself through the EMT training because I wanted a higher level of medical training. And this was before this wasn't the agency. This was me as a civilian. Wasn't even really sure which direction I was going to go. And I remember a year later, to Patrick's point, I'm at actually it was down in Illinois. But anyway, I'm at this tourist area where there's a whole bunch of people and somebody did have a medical emergency. And then to your point, Patrick, like everybody else is like, oh, somebody do something. Like, okay, well, instead of asking, that's always one of my favorite pet peeves of movies. Somebody help me. How do you not know how to deal with this situation yourself? So I didn't hesitate, and that's the military side, and just went in there. And it wasn't a life-threatening thing, but it potentially could have been, and just, calmed everybody, did the assurances, got all the information. And when the paramedics showed up, kind of going to something that Clint was talking about earlier, we had a very good and easy communication flow. Hey, this old, she's on this type of meds. Here's what she had to eat for this morning, cause of injury and it was a very good handoff. And there was that. And, and I'm not going to lie, I walked away from that saying, yeah, that's why I took that training. So I could handle these type of situations should I ever, encounter them.
Yeah.
Clint?
I'll jump in on something and just a quick little story. So this summer, I traveled up to go film this movie up in Utah and drove 5,566 miles. I mean, I was driving like a fool all the way up to the border of Nevada. So I was up at the Belleville Salt Flats up there, and get back over to work over in South Dakota. And my wife and I are out on a bike ride, and she steps off of her bike and just puts her foot right on the curb of the sidewalk she was riding on, and literally right angled her ankle. So she completely collapsed her tib fib and, destroyed her ankle, and she fell. I look back and I'm up in front of her. And I'll tell you, that kind of stuff, it's one thing when it's somebody else. It's another thing when it's a family member or your wife or your children. It will spin you up quick, and I turned around, ran back. She said, I broke my leg. And I was like, no. I was like literally refusing. And when I got a hold of her ankle and her ankle just fell sideways, I was like, 9 weeks flashed in front of my eyes, because I knew we were going to go to the emergency room. I mean, she had no ankle bones, so she would completely broke off her bottom of her tib fib. And, hold little traction on it, get her to the emergency room, had to go through surgery, pins, plates. Then we're going to have to go through, physical therapy, this, that. I'm looking for capillary refill. I'm looking for swelling, all these things that you do of emergency care, and then post-emergency care into getting somebody back to being where they can move, where they're now physically can do something. So we've been dealing with that, the last couple of weeks. And I mean, you just never know. Something so simple as a bike ride, can set you on 9 weeks of recovery. That simple. And having some training, to know what you're identifying, get to the hospital, and then have to deal with that kind of stuff. But you never know when it's going to happen. The time picks you for sure. And I mean, that's why I said the Red Cross, because it's very inexpensive. You can get down there, get some training if you have very little, and start getting that mindset that we're going to be talking about, in my capabilities. What can I do to be an asset here, and not just be the one that's doesn't know what to do.
Yeah. Amen.
And with that experience, that training, so, on the medical side, everybody has to look at this from their own environmental considerations, their own physical considerations, what scenario it is that you're prepping for. Some of these things, some of the basic medical type of training we're talking about may or may not really do you much good if, this is like some type of, nuclear exchange or radiological terrorist event, then you might be looking at different meds and how to secure your facility and limit your exposure to whether it's a chem bio or radiological event. But the thing we are talking about, where this will score no matter the scenario, minus dying in a nuclear fireball, but these basic levels of first aid and medical, and then, as we've said ad nauseum, and I'm going to say it again, yeah, that shooting and all that stuff, it's important. And that's where everybody wants to focus their time, because that's the cool guy in the CQB. But it's this medical, and with that experience, I also think that, everybody's different, but you might find yourself being able to, and as Clint just said, and under a crisis, when it's your family, you may not be able to keep that in check, right? The emotions are going to be there, but there's other times with that experience and with that, and having unfortunately maybe been through those situations, you're calming other people down. I mean, this is a Army Reserve story way back in the day. Heat stroke is a real thing, and that's a killer, right? And anybody who's been in the military knows, with all the gear and everything and what you're doing. And just remember, we were bringing in an aircraft because we had to evacuate one of our guys. He was crashing hard, and our medics were starting to run someplace. And, I remember, Patrick, I think I was like an E6 at that time, a squad leader. And I just remember yelling at him, command voice, and he just stopped me. I'm like, just slow your ass down. There's no reason for you. You start running, and then now you're the casualty. We need you, brother. Yeah, I'll go take care of the helo crew. You just take care of your patient. And everybody calm the fuck down, because you're just going to make the situation worse. And many of you could become a casualty. So Patrick and Clint, you guys want to maybe, I don't know why I went in that direction that it did, but I think that's kind of an important thing and a nice way to maybe take it out on the medical side.
I'm glad you did, because that's something to keep in mind too, because if you've been on the receiving end of needing medical care, which I have, and probably you guys have too, you don't need people freaking out, because you're already in a little bit of a crisis saying, oh shit, what just happened to me?
You're holding your hand. It's like, two of your fingers are bleeding. You're like, yeah, it's already freaky enough, dude.
Yeah, it's already freaky enough. I don't need to see the person that's coming to help me freak out. I need them to be calm and deliberate about what they're doing. Right. So that's that's kind of the key part. And then, going back to on the receiving end, from ever being injured, common thing I always talk about, hey, the better shape you are physically, the faster you're going to recover from whatever that physical trauma is. Broken limbs, I've by the grace of God, I've had a blood clots twice in my life. If I wasn't in the cardiovascular shape that I was in, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys. So, it's literally can save your life. So don't just think of like, hey, I'm looking good for, social media, or I want to, flex in front of people. Make sure that your whole body's in shape, because you never know when that's going to come into play. It could be a car accident. It could be anything.
Yeah, for sure.
Clint,
what would you like to add there on that kind of last part?
No, and it's funny because I have a major trauma bag that I keep that's, got, pneumothorax stuff. You can do, chest compression, thing like that. I've got a lot of stuff. I can pop IVs, push fluids, but I'll tell you what, it seems like the stuff I use the most is a little bleeder kit out on the range. It's nice to have those, clot bandages, pressure dressings, some packing gauze, all those kind of things. You need to know how to use it, or at least the basics. But I'll tell you what, I keep, I scale that down. The big bag stays in the vehicle. The M3 bag, stays on my ATV or whatever. On my kit, I keep us, the basics, pressure dressing, clot bandage, and some Band-Aids, a little bit of tape, things like that where you can improvise a little bit. And let me tell you, I've had to improvise a lot of times, trying to stop bleeding on things, so tourniquets, another one. Practice it, get a tourniquet, watch some videos. If you have nothing else, there's a lot of good information out there that you can just get the basics down and watch it, listen, do it, put it on, train a little bit. Because man, boy, when it happens, you don't want to feel like, man, I have no skills here. So go out and try it.
Yeah. And don't forget, when he says practice, that means with your offhand as well, because there's nothing that says you're going to be able to, manipulate your dominant hand to use this. You might not have, you might be using this on yourself. So, and you might not be able to use two hands. So don't forget, practice just means, just to kind of Clint's point, I know this is going to sound stupid, but, hey, we've given ourselves IVs, training, all that stuff, to include giving yourself an IV with your non-dominant hand. And then do that, in a moving vehicle, on a bumpy road type of shit. So you got to get out there and practice that stuff. Yeah.
Hey, Mark, practice that stuff on the range too. We did a lot of that stuff in GRS. So I brought that to the SWAT team I was on. And, that's where we kind of like at GRS, we kind of started going to the, what's called the rat tourniquet versus the cat. A lot of people, that's kind of like the industry standard, but there's a lot of Velcro on that thing. So if you're in a hurry to try to get it on because you're bleeding out and you're doing, self-aid, it gets in the way. That's where the rat was like, hey, that's a really quick thing. It gets a bite real fast. It's secured real fast. No Velcro or anything. However you choose to do it. I'm not going to, just advocate for one brand or anything, but yeah, practice it under stress. And if the general rule of any equipment, especially this stuff, 2 is 1, 1 is none. Make sure you have at least 2. And if you're going to put one on somebody, make sure you're keeping one for yourself, because it's just like the air masks on a plane. Hey, you got to put yours on first. Make sure you're okay before you start rendering aid to other people.
And just so we don't get too far afield. So again, if we're talking about you're bugging out or bugging in, or you're trying to regroup, with your clan, your group of people, don't forget your personal meds, and then just start thinking about how you're going to, what is the crisis? Do you have enough meds? Is that going to put you into some type of negative, tailspin 30 days later once you don't have your meds anymore? Are there other holistic things that you can look like that can substitute, to Patrick's point, a lot of that is also physical fitness can really help make a difference there. But yeah, practice. And then kind of to the thing that Clint was kind of alluding to earlier is that I don't want to call it, well, Patrick kind of did too, uniformity. It doesn't always have to be everybody's got their first aid kit right here, but people in your group, everybody should have a first aid kit. And it should be, as Clint said, maybe you've got a larger, more robust kit in your vehicle, but then, you've got one and maybe one person in their ruck has an even, slightly more, because now again, you're looking at splints, you're looking at other type of, issues that you need to deal with, right? SAM splints, maybe you do have an IV bag in there and you've got some sutures and things like that, but then down to that individual level, whatever it is. And then my final comment. So I just bought a SWAT T tourniquet, and just to what everybody said, I'm going to break it out. They're like $15. I'm going to take it out and mess around and play with it, because it's also a pressure dressing. So it's a tourniquet and a pressure dressing. I want to see, because I like that concept, right? Because maybe I don't have to go right to the tourniquet and really tighten it down, but I can actually get it, and it's really functioning more as a pressure dressing at the time. And, what these two gentlemen just said, I will get that out and I'll start messing around with it. And if I like it, then I'll buy a couple more. And if I don't like it, then I'll go back into whatever I'm doing. So, Clint?
So it was kind of funny, because when I was a very, very young Ranger medic, we were out doing some low-level flight on some Blackhawks, and I was on a CSAR team. So we had just done some extraction of some aircraft pilots.
Just real quickly, CSAR, everybody. So combat search and rescue.
Yep. So we were on the CSAR team. So we had guys with, cutters that are cutting the aircraft and extracting people out or whatever, burning, wreckage and all this kind of stuff. You're fast roping in with fire extinguishers and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's a lot of stuff going on. And we got these casualties back on. I had 3 casualties on a Black Hawk in blackout flight. So only red lights. And I had 2 PJs on the aircraft with me, older, more experienced guys. And they were like, all right, start IVs on all 3 of them. So I had to pop IVs on all 3 of these dudes, live IVs, low level flight, blackout, crowded Black Hawk, 45-degree angle, went ahead and inserted my IV lines. Boom, got a flash. And at the end of that, those PJs walked over and slapped me on the back and said, man, that was putting some IVs in. I haven't seen that lately. And I walked away barrel chested freedom fighter after that, because I was able to pop them 3 IVs with no problem. And I mean, when I say that, I was at the emergency room and the 2 ladies are trying to put an IV in my wife when she hurts her ankle. They put more holes in her, and it's hard sticking a lady. Yeah. So practicing that kind of stuff, small veins and stuff, but those are the skills. You get out there, you got to do it. I put in a lot of IVs. So,
and just to let everybody know, the one thing that Clint left out, I mean, he told you he was in a Black Hawk and it was crowded and he's, red light. But what he forgot about is what it's like flying in a Black Hawk. I mean, so that wasn't like he was just standing here on solid ground like we are right now. No.
Low level flight is no joke when they're banking and turning, and they're trying to, the pilots are making it hard on you because they know what you're doing in the back.
Clint, were they doing Nap of the Earth at that time?
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. All right. Hey, where are you guys going to go? We're at 2. It's been 2.5 hours. Yeah. I think we're at a good point to kind of wrap it up right there. And that was a damn good story, because then, Patrick, that's what I was thinking. And low level, but if it was Nap of the Earth, I mean,
it's like a roller coaster.
Oh yeah.
So, all right, what do you guys? Do you guys? Hey, everybody who's watching, I really appreciate you guys being here. And if you watch this afterwards, let us know. Again, we'll be back next Sunday. We're gonna actually take 3 different scenarios. We're gonna kind of just take everything we've talked about and then use 3 scenarios to kind of guide us in our way forward. There is another little bit aspect when I taught this course, beg, barter, trade or steal. I'm going to leave some of that out. Maybe we'll start off with that next week, just to kind of introduce that concept, because again, we're talking about self-reliance for 72 hours. Maybe you have to barter for some of the things you don't have. So maybe you get some stuff that you don't care about. Maybe you don't smoke, maybe you don't drink. And so you're never going to tap into that supply, but you'll be able to trade that for some people, especially people who suddenly don't have cigarettes and alcohol anymore. So we'll save that for later. That's my kind of comment right there. Patrick, Clint, let's start. Patrick, final comments, and then we'll come to Clint, and then we'll just close it out and call it a day.
Now, yeah, I think we kind of touched on some things, hit the folks with a fire hose of information. Please, if you're interested in any of the topics we've talked about, maybe just go back and just listen to portions of it, and then jot down some notes and think of like actual practical ways that you could either try to develop the skill, or you just find ways to practice it and find like-minded people. Some of my favorite folks to work with are psychologists and doctors, because I'm always going to learn something from those folks, right? The shooting community, hey, you know what? You reach skill, you can always come back and get that. The other things, that's where we want to grow and develop. So I'll just leave it at that. Thanks, and hopefully you guys are able to chime in, more, or just send some feedback on any of the topics we've discussed tonight.
Clint?
Yeah, I'll jump in there with that as well. I mean, things that we talk about, stories, experiences that shape and mold the kind of training that you want to get, the kind of asset that you want to become for your family, for yourself, for your community. If you've got any of those questions, if there's something that we missed that you want to hear about, hit Mark on here and we'll circle around and cover some of those topics a little bit more in depth. You get a lot of experience. You can talk about a lot of things. I've failed at a lot of things, and that's where I learned. And I learned I didn't, I needed to learn this better and become more of an asset. So if there's something that we can cover for you, hit us up and we'll try to elaborate on those things in a future podcast.
And I'll just throw myself under the bus right there. And I've said it. Well, Clint, I may not have said it to you. I know I've said it to Patrick in the past. I used to think I was good with handguns, and then I came in 5th place at a thing, and my buddies gave me a 5th place trophy, and then I just reapplied myself. And I'm not saying I'm the end all be all, but it's exactly that. Sometimes you need that humility, that kick in the nuts, because your ego has gotten a little bit too big, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So that's one comment. And then going forward, I know I've already had some feedback. Hey, these things are way too long. And I just don't really, I don't know how exactly to respond to that. They are long. I mean, there's just no way we can do this in a 30-minute, 1 hour, unless we did it every day and then took every section and did it. So to Patrick's point, go back and, watch again or listen, or don't try to digest all this in one episode, give it a little bit. And that's maybe the way going forward. Now, Blake and I are going to try to get in there. And again, this is time, and he's got a family and a business, and I've got a business, and we're trying, you got a million other things to do, but we do want to go in there and start breaking these things out. So for example, for tonight, we'll go and take the shoot portion, and then that'll be its own standalone. And then the move, and that'll be a standalone. And then, and I tried doing it the last time, boys, but it's just so hard. I'm sitting here still doing things, but I'm trying to make notes. Oh, Clint had a great point at this time. Oh, Patrick said something here. I just can't do that and then maneuver all this at the same time. But that's just another thing of going back, listening to the content, finding that, and making those standalone videos. So everybody just be patient. We're working on that. And then, but I just want to just real quickly, the last kind of comments that came in. So Gene said, love all the info and the stories. It's been a great night, but here's and no offense to anyone else's comments, but this is what it's all about right here. Learn me something. Great episode. And this is what I like this. Seriously, that's what our, the center line, keep thinking. That's part of the motto. Learn me something's comment. What I learned today is that I have a lot to learn. Keep that mindset right there. Learn me something. Yep. Just be open. Keep your mind open to, there's a lot more out there because it's the same with all three of us as well. There's always a lot more to learn. Final comments right there, Patrick and Clint.
I'll jump in on this one real quick for Patrick. Just what you said, Mark, spent a lot of time doing firearms training, and I had made the mistake before when people would come out on the range and they got a really nice set of kit. They got all the bells and whistles, apparently deep pockets. And, another guy isn't as flashy. And sometimes you allow yourself to think that, wow, that this person must know something. And then you figure out real quick that they don't. And what I started doing within my firearms training was I did a baseline at the very beginning. Before we get in and talk about anything at all, what I'm going to have you is do this course of fire. All we're going to talk about is the safety And that's all I want you to do is be safe. But this is what I want you to do. Shoot this, 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 and this. And I'm going to stand back and watch. And I was able to ascertain exactly what I needed to work with on each one of those people, you know, and what I would be able to stand back and watch it. So if you're finding these skills and you say, I have a weakness in this area, but I really want to learn this. I just watched, and I'm not a podcast guy, but I watched a Sean Ryan podcast last night, 3.5 hours or something, because I was interested in what was being put out. That information, if we're in an inflection point in this country. Something's going to happen. You know, it's happening. So having these skills and being an asset to your family, to your loved ones, to the people that you care about, you got to get out and continue to knock the rust off or polish these skills so you're not standing there with no answers. You know, you need to be able to be that asset. So I guess that's what I got to say, Patrick.
Yep. Yeah. So I'll just key right off that. I think I mentioned that, I'm a big fan of psychologists, right? When things go bad, I get asked all the time, hey, what are we going to do? What should we do? These types of questions, because people don't have an answer. They don't have a collection of skills that they can draw upon. When you do this, when you develop your own skill, you build a psychological or a mental blueprint for what you can do and what can be, what you can use. When you're faced with these types of things, this is a Tony Blauer thing. I'll give the coach full credit for this. You're either, boils down to being threatened or challenged. You're threatened. All you're worried about is what's going to happen to me. What are they, whoever they is, what are they going to do to me versus, hey, what am I going to do? What actions can I take? And when you start filling your blueprint with some of the skills that we've discussed tonight, now you get challenged. You're like, okay, hey, this is maybe not the optimal situation for me, but if it happens, boom, I've got all these options at my disposal. And the more that you can develop them on your own and share with your family and your community, the better off you're going to be. That goes to this, again, self-reliance group.
Yeah.
I'm going to wrap it up. You guys just gave me the perfect outro. So accept the challenge of what Clint just said, that whether you want to, so many people don't want to admit this. We are, and that's why it was called the inflection point. We are at an inflection point. It is already happening. The only people who don't see that are the people who are unwilling, and that goes into the psychology, everything Patrick just talked about. So boys and girls, accept the challenge, realize that we are in that moment, and it is happening around us right now. Doesn't mean we're all going to die tomorrow. That's not what we're saying, but accept the challenge and figure out how you're going to rise to the occasion so you can go home, like Clint said, so you can take care of you and yours and make it home. All right, everybody. Thank you for staying with us here tonight. A little bit of a longer live stream. We'll be kind of just doing some scenarios next Sunday. If you do have questions and comments, as always, just, Mark at Millstone-SRG. That should be there on our page and all that stuff anyway. So thank you for joining us tonight. Hats off to Patrick. Hats off to Clint for taking time away from their families to share their background and information with you and experiences with you as well. So, all right, everybody, reach out if you got questions. Otherwise, we'll see you on next Sunday. And until then, keep thinking, keep moving, and God, just never fucking quit. Never quit. All right, everybody, we'll talk to you next week.